Chapter 3404. She looked at Jun Ju Shang in front of her. He was obviously more human than the last time she had seen him. She couldn't help but smile. My elder sister. What happened to her? Jun Ju Shang looked at her and said coldly, didn't you give her the pills? What did she do that you don't know? Fengjiu smiled and spread her hands. What did my sister do? I really don't know. Seeing this, Jun Ju Shang felt suffocated in his heart. His hands behind his back were tightly clenched into fists. He knew that Fengjiu was pretending not to know. In fact, she knew very well what Wanyan Qianhua had done. But when it came to him, he couldn't say it out loud. Taking a deep breath, he suppressed his emotions and asked, you really don't want to tell me where she is? Fengjiu smiled, I don't know where she went, so I can't tell you anything. You should know that even if I can't find her now, I will definitely find her in the future. Jun Ju Shang said. He flung his sleeves and turned to leave. Looking at his departing figure, Fengjiu smiled. It was good to make him anxious. Otherwise, he wouldn't know how good his sister was. After Xianyuan Mose and Mo Chen finished their game, Fengjiu came back. Jun Ju Shang was no longer behind her. Seeing this, Mose asked, he left. He left. Fengjiu said with a smile. He knew that Jun Ju Shang would definitely send people to pay attention to their movements. Of course, one day, Jun Ju Shang might have an idea and go to the Wanyan family in the lower realm to look for him. Everyone sat down and talked about Jun Ju Shang. Seeing that Fengjiu didn't say anything else, they didn't ask further. They rested for a night. The next morning, the group continued their journey. A few days later, when they arrived at the foot of the mountain, they saw that there were already many cultivators sitting cross-legged or resting on trees. Obviously, they had been here for some time. Seeing that the group had arrived, the crowd naturally found a cave for them to rest in. However, they did not expect that Sovereign Tong Tian and the others would not show up even until the appointed day. That's strange. The 1-month deadline is today. It's almost noon, why haven't I seen Sovereign Tong Tian yet? Don't tell me he's not coming. That's impossible, right? Sovereign Tong Tian was a sovereign, so how could he stand him up? This is a very shameful thing. For a time, the cultivators were all discussing. They had thought that they would see a fierce battle today, an exciting scene of two monarchs fighting, but they did not expect that the sovereign of Tong Tian was still nowhere to be seen. At the peak of Mount Shao, Xianyuan Mose stood against the wind with Fengjiu by his side. The two of them, one black and one red, were very conspicuous as they stood at a high point. They looked down at the foot of the mountain. Because of the distance, the cultivators at the foot of the mountain were as inconspicuous as ants. It's almost noon. Sovereign Tong Tian wouldn't really dare to come, would he? Fengjiu looked at Xianyuan Mose and said with some surprise. Xianyuan Mose frowned slightly and said, as a sovereign, he shouldn't have stood me up. Especially for this battle, he accepted it without hesitation. Chapter 3405. If he doesn't come, then let's go back. Xianyuan Mose said, if he's afraid, then there's no need to fight. Fengjiu nodded and waited with him until noon. Suddenly, dark clouds drifted over from the sky. The dark clouds stirred and formed a vortex that gave off a terrifying presence. The entire Pyrolite mountain was enveloped by the aura from the vortex and became enveloped in an oppressive presence. Ah! It's Sovereign Tong Tian. It must be Sovereign Tong Tian. Some cultivators cried out in alarm. They could not help but run to the foot of the mountain to hide when they sensed the terrifying aura. At the foot of the mountain, Sovereign Xuanwu was worried that Hao, and the others would not be able to withstand the pressure. With a wave of his hand, he set up a defensive boundary to block the pressure for them. At the same time, he raised his head to look at the sky. On Pyrolite Mountain, Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu looked at the vortex at the same time. They saw a huge human face on it. Xianyuan Mo's eyes flashed when he saw the face. It was indeed Sovereign Tong Tian. However, he could not help but be surprised that he would appear in such a manner. Did he not intend to reveal his true form to fight? Xianyuan Mo's. Fengjiu. You're despicable and shameless. An angry roar suddenly came from above. It was mixed with curses. The two of them were surprised and looked at the figure in confusion. What do you mean? We've been waiting for you here since early morning. If you don't dare to fight, then don't accept the challenge. You've accepted the challenge, but you're still hiding. What a disgrace. Feng Jiu snorted coldly, and her words were very rude. When Sovereign Tong Tian heard this, he was even more enraged. You dare to play the blame game? I agreed to fight Xianyuan Mo's, but what about you? How many people are lying in ambush? There's no need for you and me to talk about it. That holy son of the temple, and that old thing Black Tortoise, do you think I don't know? Would this monarch be stupid enough to come here and fight with Xianyuan Mo's, and then not be able to leave here alive in the end? Do you think this monarch is a fool? The cultivators at the foot of the mountain only knew Feng Jiu and Xianyuan Mo's. As for the holy son of the divine temple and the monarch of the Black Tortoise, they didn't know who they were. When he heard that the two of them were here, he couldn't help but look towards Feng Jiu's group. Looking at it, he couldn't help but feel a little strange. Feng Jiu's group was full of handsome men and beautiful women. They really couldn't tell who was who. Outside the cave, Mo Chen and the Black Tortoise Sovereign heard the words of Sovereign Tong Tian and had strange looks on their faces. The former was still fine, with a faint smile on his face. But the latter rubbed his chin and muttered, "Old thing." How come he didn't know that he was associated with the word "bold thing"? Feng Jiu and Xianyuan Mo's heard the words of Sovereign Tong Tian and finally understood why he didn't dare to show himself. Knowing the reason, the two of them looked at each other and shook their heads. Chapter 3406. I alone am enough to deal with you. I don't need anyone else's help. Xianyuan Mo's spoke in a low voice. His voice contained a powerful aura of spiritual energy as it shot towards the whirlpool in the sky. The low voice rumbled into his ears and attacked his divine sense. In that instant, the sovereign of Skirich felt a powerful threat. His heart loosened as he felt a sense of shock and disbelief. Originally, he thought that Xianyuan Mo's wanted the others to help him, so that they could surround and attack him. However, he didn't expect that his voice alone would contain such a powerful pressure and intimidating force that it was enough to make him tremble in fear. How did he do it? His skeletal age was only around 30 years old, yet he was already so terrifying. At this moment, he could not help but feel a sense of relief. He was glad that he had not come to fight him. Otherwise, he would have fallen in this battle. He forcefully suppressed the shock and trembling in his heart and suppressed his voice as he said gloomily, "Humph. Let's forget about this battle. We have plenty of time in the future." As he spoke, the whirlpool in the sky began to spin. As the dark clouds dissipated, the aura in the sky gradually returned to normal. Once the oppressive aura dissipated, the cultivators at the foot of Mount E heaved a sigh of relief. They raised their sleeves to wipe off the cold sweat on their foreheads as they looked up with sparkling eyes. Xianyuan Mo's and Feng Jiu were too powerful. Even the sovereign of Skirich did not dare to provoke them. With them around, the sovereign of Skirich would no longer have any designs on the forces on this mainland. The sovereign of Black Tortoise, who was at the foot of Mount E, watched as the sovereign of Skirich left after saying his piece. He could not help but sneer. I didn't know that there would be a time when he would admit defeat. How interesting. Mo Chen, who was next to him, smiled gently. He watched as the two figures flew down from above and said, "It would be great if they could stop thinking about it." However, with their current power, even if the sovereign of Skirich wants to attack them, he would have to think twice. How could it be easy to unify the world? Right now, they had just taken a step forward. Their enemies were not just Sovereign Tong Tian alone. What they were afraid of was when their enemies would join forces, or if they had other intentions. Thinking of this, Mo Chen sighed inwardly. What was to come would come. If it was a blessing, it would not be a curse. If it was a curse, it could not be avoided. Their life and death calamity would come sooner or later. It was just that he did not know when it would be. Father, mother. Hao saw them return and quickly rushed forward. Fengjiu caught him and rubbed his head. It looks like we can go home now. If we knew he didn't have the guts to fight, we wouldn't have come here. The Black Tortoise Monarch and his wife looked at each other and said, judging from the current situation, Sovereign Tong Tian won't attack you. If you want to go back, we should leave too. Hearing this, Hao who was hugging Fengjiu's leg, turned to look at them. He blinked and did not speak. Hao we will come to see you again in the future. When you want to go back with us in the future, or when you have time, we will come to pick you up and play with you for a while, she said softly. Looking at her son, she sighed softly. Chapter 3407. Let's leave this place first. Xianyuan Mo said. He gestured for everyone to get ready and leave. Yes, there are too many people here. Let's leave first. Monarch Xuanwu also said. He hugged his wife and left with the others. Mo Chen, Guan Xilin and the others followed beside them. Lang Hua and the others paid attention to make sure no one was following them. After they left Mount Shao, they went to a deserted place. Monarch Xuanwu and his wife said goodbye to everyone and left with their guards in a carriage. After they left, Fengjiu carried Hao and said to everyone, let's go to the city to rest first. Since everyone is out, I think it's time to arrange things for us to go back. Also, I have something to discuss with all of you. Hearing this, everyone nodded. They went into the city and found an inn to book. After resting for a while, Xianyuan Mo's, Fengjiu, Mo Chen, and Guan Xilin sat down at a table in the courtyard. Xiaojiu, what do you want to discuss with us? Guan Xilin asked, looking at her. Fengjiu gazed at the three of them and said, it's like this. I want to discuss the path to the lower realms with all of you. I want to join forces with all of you to open up a passage between the upper realms and the lower realms. In this way, even those who aren't strong enough will be able to enter the upper realms through the passage we open up. Hearing this, the three of them were stunned. Guan Xilin was stunned. He felt that he could not do this. She mentioned this because she wanted Mo Zhe and Mo Chen's help, right? Xianyuan Mo's and Mo Chen were deep in thought. After a while, Xianyuan Mo's said, the upper and lower worlds are suppressed by the laws of heaven and earth. That's why we could only come up from the immortal ascension stairs. If we want to open the seal between the upper and lower worlds, we have to break the laws of heaven and earth on the immortal ascension stairs. I originally wanted to open up the heaven and earth laws on the immortal ascension stairs. Only then would cultivators from the lower realm be able to come up here. It would also be more convenient for us to move around. Fengjiu paused for a moment before continuing, otherwise, even if we can use spatial distortions or formations to teleport people back, it will be troublesome to get them back. Since that's the case, we might as well break the laws of heaven and earth. After all, we have the ability to do so now. Indeed, divine kings have the ability to do so. However, breaking the laws of heaven and earth is no small matter. Furthermore, if you really want to do so, you have to re-establish the laws of heaven and earth in the lower world. Mo Chen looked at them and said, divine kings can tear open the void and create boundaries. Both the sovereign of Black Tortoise and the sovereign of Sky Reaching have boundaries. That's why they are called sovereigns. You have the ability to do so, but you haven't become sovereigns. Why don't you take this opportunity to take over the lower world? Hearing this, Xianyuan Mo's looked at Fengjiu and said, what he said makes sense. In the lower world, all you have to do is summon the guardians from the four corners of the heaven and give them instructions. Then, spread your divine consciousness throughout the lower world. Then, you will be the sovereign of the lower world. Hearing this, Fengjiu frowned and said to Xianyuan Mose, I have that floating piece of land. I'm not in a hurry to create boundaries. Why don't you take over the lower world first? Chapter 3408. Seeing this, Fengjiu was slightly surprised and glanced at him. It's not as easy to conquer the upper realm as it is to conquer the lower realm. It's okay, I know what I'm doing. Xianyuan Mose looked at her and said, it shouldn't be difficult to open a passage between the two realms if we work together. Since we've decided, there's no need for teleportation when we go back. Let's just open the ladder of immortality. Mo Chen nodded. Okay, I'll help you when the time comes. What about me? What can I do to help? Guan Shilin asked. Fengjiu smiled and said, I'm telling you this today so that you can be prepared. When we go back, let's go to the sect first. The exit of the ladder of immortality is with the sect of the Cerulean planet. If we want to open a passage between the upper realm and the lower realm, we'll have to discuss it with the sect leader. With your current strength, I think the sect leader of the Cerulean planet won't stop you as long as you have the ability to do it. Mo Chen said gently. He picked up the teacup in front of him and took a sip of tea. Then he put down the teacup and said to them, we haven't had much rest these days. It's rare for us to come to the inn today. You should all have a good rest. With that, he stood up and left. Seeing this, Guan Shilin smiled and said, that's true. You two should go back and rest too. I'll go back first too. After they left, Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu sat and chatted for a while. Then they went back to their room. When they reached the room, Ling Shuang came up to them. Master, Yama God, should I prepare water for you to take a bath? Yes, prepare water. Fengjiu nodded and walked into the room with Xianyuan Mose. Xianyuan Mose sat down at the table and pulled Fengjiu onto his lap. He hugged her and rested his chin on her shoulder. He asked in a low voice, Jiu, do you feel that Mo Chen's attitude towards you has changed? Fengjiu was stunned for a moment, slightly turned his head, just brushed his lips across his cheek, could not help but chuckle, why do you ask? Xianyuan Mose, who was originally feeling a little jealous, felt a little happy when her soft lips kissed him. However, when he heard her words, his gaze moved and he said in a muffled voice, ever since he appeared this time, I feel that his performance has been a little different. His voice was low, and his eyes flashed with an indescribable light. After 5 years, although he tried his best to act the same as before, I can feel that he treats you differently. Fengjiu's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. What do you mean? I can tell that he used to admire you very much. He followed you because of his master's instructions. At first, he looked at you with a gaze of pure admiration. Even if he was a little different sometimes, he wasn't really attracted to you. But later on, it gradually changed. That feeling turned into a desire to protect you. Until this time, after 5 years, the gaze he occasionally looks at you with is very different. Xianyuan Mose frowned as he spoke. Sometimes, when he looks at you, it's as if he has known you for a long time. He did not say that the helplessness, love, and affection in Mo Chen's eyes made him feel a sense of danger. Chapter 3409. He did not know what Mo Chen had been through in the past few years. What did he encounter? Even if he did not want to pay attention to it, it was obvious that he treated her differently. However, he also knew that he was restraining himself and suppressing his emotions. It was because of this that he found it strange and could not help but ask. He wanted to know what she was thinking. Hearing his words, Fengjiu's expression changed slightly. He also thought about the changes in Mo Chen along the way. Compared to Mo Chen, as a woman, she was more sensitive. Naturally, she could sense that Mo Chen treated her differently, especially the words he said to her. However, that feeling was very strange. She could not pinpoint the reason for it and had no way of finding out. So, she stretched out her hand to hold his and spoke gently, "Don't let your thoughts run wild. We're about to get married. Not to mention that Mo Chen has become the holy child of the divine temple. Supposedly, he cultivated for 5 years in the sacred pagoda for the sake of severing his emotions and desires. He probably only has a duty to protect me. After all, his master has instructed him to always follow me. Furthermore." At this point, she paused and her eyes flashed. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose asked, "Furthermore what?" Fengjiu paused for a moment and said, "Once, he mentioned to me that his life is linked to mine. He said that he has a life and death tribulation. Whether he lives or dies, only I can resolve it." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's brows furrowed tightly. He did not speak. But he also said that we will also have a life and death tribulation. He also wants to protect us. Therefore, I once thought, will the life and death tribulation be linked? Fengjiu turned to look at him. Seeing his brows furrowed and his expression serious, she could not help but chuckle and nudge him, all right. Don't think so much. At least we haven't encountered that tribulation yet." As she spoke, she withdrew from his embrace. When she heard Ling Shuang say that the water was ready, she stood up and said, "I'm going to take a bath first." Xianyuan Mose watched her walk behind the screen and sat at the table, deep in thought. With their current strength, who could threaten them? What if there was a life and death calamity? And when would it come true? There was still no news about the ancient lotus seed she had mentioned. The demon lord who had disappeared had not shown up for a long time, and the person who had the black lotus of destruction. Thinking of this, his face turned cold. He was not afraid of those in the light, but he was afraid of those in the dark. After all, it was easy to block a spear in the light, but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. If those people did not get rid of them, it would be a big problem. It seemed that after they got married, he would have to let his subordinates investigate this matter properly and see what those people had done in recent years. He did not know how much time had passed, but when he came back to his senses, he saw that Fengjiu had gone in for a long time and had not come out. He also did not hear the sound of water, so he got up and walked behind the screen. He saw that half of her body was leaning back against the side of the bathtub with floating red petals. Her slender shoulders and slender snow-white neck were exposed above the water, with a few petals and water droplets on them, looking very attractive. And at this time, her eyes were tightly closed, as if she was sleeping soundly. Even when half of her chest was exposed above the water, she did not notice. Chapter 34:10. He put her on the bed, but did not help her get dressed. Instead, he wrapped her in the quilt, dried her hair, and let her sleep first. Then, without letting Lang Mo change the water, he went behind the screen to take a shower. Then, wrapped in a bath towel, he came to the bedside. Looking at her snow-white beautiful back that was exposed when she turned over on the bed, the beautiful curve from top to bottom outlined an extremely seductive curve. In an instant, his breathing became heavier. He wiped off the water stains on his body and walked forward. He removed the large bath towel from his body and threw it aside. Then, he got into the bed naked. He lifted the quilt and lay down as well. He reached out and pulled the naked Fengjiu into his arms. "Ah Jiu," that he called in a low voice. His deep voice was magnetic. In a daze, Fengjiu responded softly, but she did not even open her eyes. She reached out and hugged his waist. When she touched him, she woke up. Her eyes were still a bit sleepy after sleeping. She looked at the handsome face in front of her and asked blankly, "Why aren't you wearing clothes?" As soon as the voice came out, she let out a low cry. She felt a pair of big hands caressing her waist and landing on her buttocks. At the same time, the palm pressed her hard, causing her body to be tightly pressed against his. Under the blanket, the two naked bodies pressed against each other, gently caressing each other's bodies. That kind of touch and the burning passion in his eyes made her blush uncontrollably. "This is an inn." She glared at him angrily. Shen Yuanmo's chuckled. "Yes, I know this is an inn." As he spoke, he leaned down and kissed her lips. His big hands under the quilt also moved around her body with his kiss. Although it was not the first time the two of them were naked, Fengjiu was still a bit shy. After all, the two of them had never taken the last step. But tonight, he was inexplicably passionate, easily stirring up the fire in her body. She followed her body's instinct to respond to his passion. The two people in the room were glued to each other like glue. At this time, Hao, who was wearing an undershirt, came to the front of the room while rubbing his eyes. Seeing Ling Shuang outside the room, he raised his head and called, "Aunt Shuang, I can't sleep. I want to sleep with father and mother." Hearing this, Ling Shuang glanced at the room behind her and said, "Your father and mother are already asleep. Go back to your room and sleep." Fortunately, she set up a soundproof enchantment for them after hearing the movements inside. Otherwise, if Hao heard it, he might think that something was going on inside. Thinking of what her master and Yama Lord were doing inside, Ling Shuang's cold and elegant face flashed with a trace of uneasiness. She coughed and said to Hao again, "Good boy, go back to sleep." Hao looked at the tightly shut room and blinked. He asked curiously, "How can't sleep? Why did father and mother fall asleep so early?" Hearing this, Ling Shuang didn't know how to answer for a moment. Just then, she saw Ling Hua and Du Fan coming over. She called out, "Come over and take Hao back to his room to rest." The two of them looked at each other and walked over. They glanced at the room with the soundproof enchantment, then looked at Ling Shuang. Du Fan asked with a smile, "Master and the others are asleep?" Chapter 34:11. Ling Hua glanced at his sister and smiled gently. He said to Hao, "I'll accompany you back to your room. Let your father and mother have a good rest. If there's anything, you can find them tomorrow." Hao nodded, "Okay." Then he held Ling Hua's hand and walked back. After the two of them walked away, Du Fan smiled ambiguously and glanced at the room. "Are they really asleep?" Ling Shuang glanced at him and looked away. "Why aren't you going to rest? Do you want to keep watch here?" "Ha ha ha, I'm going back. I don't dare to eavesdrop in my master's room. It's better to go back and sleep." As Du Fan spoke, he opened the fan in his hand and fanned himself. "Actually, you don't have to keep watch here. This inn is full of our people and no one would dare to attack us at this time." Ling Shuang didn't say anything. He just sat cross-legged in front of the door and closed his eyes to rest. She stayed here because if her master needed anything, he could call her immediately. After all, if he needed water or other things, it wouldn't be appropriate for others to send it in. Seeing this, Du Fan smiled and went back to his room to rest. He was going to take over the night shift in the second half of the night. On the other side, Zhen Zhishang's face darkened day by day because the people he sent out couldn't find Wanyan Qianhua's whereabouts. He chased after Fengjiu to ask, but she refused to tell him. He returned to the sect and listened to the middle-aged man report the news outside. The more he listened, the colder his face became. How can there be no news of a living person? Have you sent people to investigate the places where she used to train and the places where she stayed outside? The middle-aged man knew the sect master's mood, so he answered carefully. He glanced at the sect master and said, "The people we sent out didn't have any news of Miss Wanyan. Her master also didn't know. The others aren't familiar with her and don't have a deep relationship with her. Of course, they don't know where she went. However, they are trying very hard to find her. Don't worry, sect master, we will find her sooner or later." Zhen Zhishang frowned and thought with a cold face. After a long time, he asked, have you checked the Wanyan family? That family is her master's family. She shouldn't have gone back for a long time. Could she have gone to the Wanyan family this time? The middle-aged man hesitated and said, I have sent people to check. The people of the Wanyan family said that she didn't go back. She hasn't gone back for a long time and hasn't contacted them. Moreover, I feel that if she wants to hide, she won't hide in a place we know about. She shouldn't go back to a target like the Wanyan family. I feel that she is most likely hiding in some kind of training forest, just like a few years ago. Junju Shang took a deep breath and said, send more people to keep an eye on Fengjiu. Others don't know where she went, but Fengjiu definitely knows. It's a pity that she won't say anything. We can't force her to say anything. The middle-aged man sighed. You can leave. Junju Shang waved his hand and indicated for him to leave. Yes. The middle-aged man responded and left the room. After he left, Junju Shang stood up and walked to the window. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked outside. When he thought of the woman who had raped him and then ran away, the suppressed flame in his heart flared up again. Chapter 34:12. Achoo! At the same time, Wanyan Qianhua, who was in the inn, sneezed. She felt her hair stand on end. She felt that Junju Shang was definitely gnashing his teeth as he called out her name. When she thought of his sullen and angry expression that night, she couldn't help but tighten her red clothes. Yes, she had taken advantage of him, but she had to be on guard against him appearing at all times. However, she was in contact with Fengjiu. If Junju Shang came to the lower realm, Fengjiu would immediately inform her. She walked out of the room in the inn and sat down on the first floor. She ordered a few dishes to eat. When she appeared on the first floor with her beautiful appearance, she immediately attracted the gazes of the guests on the first floor. They stared at her like wolves. Miss, are you alone? A cultivator walked over with a wine cup in one hand and a wine jug in the other. His small eyes looked at Wanyan Qianhua, and he didn't hide the surprise in his eyes. Wanyan Qianhua's beautiful eyes glanced at that person. When she saw that he was about to sit down at the table, her lips curled into a charming smile. She kicked forward with her leg, and with a hidden force, the chair was kicked away. That person sat down and didn't have time to react. His whole body fell to the ground just like that. Ouch! When that person sat down, he saw that the chair was kicked away. He couldn't control his strength and fell to the ground in a sorry state. The wine in the wine cup in his hand spilled out and splashed all over his body. When the surrounding people saw this, they roared with laughter, which made him even more angry. Ha 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 ha! On the first floor, everyone was laughing. Some people slapped their thighs and raised their heads to laugh. Some people were laughing silently, but they couldn't hide the smile on their faces. The chaotic laughter spread out, making the first floor seem especially lively. What are you laughing at? Who dares to laugh again? The cultivator who fell to the ground angrily stood up. He fiercely smashed the wine cup in his hand on the ground. The crisp sound was covered by the loud laughter. However, when the cultivator released a ruthless aura, the people who were laughing gradually stopped laughing. Wanyan Qianhua looked at that cultivator playfully. She saw him stride forward and put the wine jug in his hand on the table. He stared at her fiercely. Do you know what kind of person I am? Wanyan Qianhua sneered. What? Are you not a man? A woman? She looked at him with disdain, and looked away in disdain. She said leisurely, this great aunt hasn't seen someone as ugly as you for a long time. If you know what's good for you, get out of here. I can't eat in front of someone like you. You're courting death. The cultivator's eyes were filled with killing intent. I think you're the one courting death. Wanyan Shirsan's low voice filled with hostility came from behind. Just as the cultivator was about to turn around, he saw that his collar was lifted up, and his whole body was lifted off the ground. Because the back of his collar was lifted up, the front of his collar was strangling his neck. For a moment, his face flushed red, and even his breathing became difficult. 13th uncle, I don't like this person. Cripple his cultivation. Wanyan Qianhua said in a calm voice. However, the words that came out of his mouth made everyone present feel shocked. Chapter 34:13. No problem. Wanyan Shisan responded and carried the person out. Not long after, there was a blood-curdling scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Then, everything returned to normal. The people in the inn didn't even dare to breathe loudly at this time. They looked at the man and woman and couldn't help but swallow their saliva. They only felt their hearts thumping, afraid that they would accidentally offend them. After throwing the person out, Wanyan Shisan came to the table and sat down. He said, on the way here, I finally know why you called me back. You can count how many people I helped you deal with on the way here. I'm your uncle, but I've become your flower protector for no reason. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua chuckled. 13th uncle, I call you 13th uncle. It's natural for you to protect me. What's more, I helped you get something good from Audiobook. Oh. What good thing? Medicinal pills. Wanyan Shisan rubbed his chin and asked. Seeing him staring at her with a burning gaze, she took out a bottle from her space and put it in front of him. I know you're about to break through, so I asked Audiobook to get this medicinal pill. When you get home, find a time to take it. Tisk tsk, if I didn't say it today, were you going to wait until we got home to give it to me? Wanyan Shisan clicked his tongue and took the bottle. He opened it and poured it out to take a look. After taking a look, his eyes couldn't help but light up. That girl Fengjiu is really generous. After saying this, he quickly put the medicinal pill away. After the two of them ate something in the inn, they flew on their swords in the direction of the Wanyan family. Compared to the Wanyan family in the upper realm, the Wanyan family in the lower realm was a reclusive family. They were not known by the world. The family was not located in a bustling town, but deep in the mountains. After all, the Wanyan family was a family of ghost masters. Naturally, deep in the mountains was more suitable for living. On this trip back, Wanyan Qianhua didn't plan to stay in the family for a long time. First, it was because the yin qi in the family was heavy, which was not conducive to her pregnancy. Second, if she was bold enough, the people in the family would probably ask who the father of the child was. Therefore, this time, she only planned to go back and take a look. After staying for a few days, she would leave and settle down in a bustling town and wait for her child to be born. However, because Fengjiu and Xianyuan Moza's marriage was going to be held here, she also had to go and congratulate them. Therefore, at this time, she was still thinking about whether she should go directly to the Peach Blossom Cove of the Phoenix Dynasty to wait for the birth or somewhere else. A few days later, Wanyan Qianhua and Wanyan Shisan arrived at the Wanyan family's residence. As soon as they approached the boundary of the Wanyan family's territory, they felt a gust of yin qi spread around them. However, for the two of them, their bodies were protected by powerful spiritual auras. In addition, they were the top people in the family. Naturally, the yin qi could not get close to them. However, before the two of them saw the gate of the Wanyan family, they already heard the sounds of battle and miserable cries. Hearing the sounds, the two of them frowned. Wanyan Shisan looked at Wanyan Qianhua beside him and asked, "Didn't they say that this was a reclusive family? Why is there a battle here? It sounds like a big commotion." Chapter 34:14. The two figures dashed forward. The closer they got, the clearer the yin qi and the ghostly howls became. Other than that, there were also some people's roars and the clanging of swords and sabers. At this time, in front of the Wanyan family's gate, there were many corpses on the ground. There were people from the Wanyan family and people from other powers. For the Wanyan family, this battle was extremely bitter. This battle had lasted from midnight until now. The Wanyan family had suffered countless casualties. Even the women and 15-year-old youths had come out to fight to protect the Wanyan family. However, the power of one family was limited. Especially when the other side was surrounded by 200 to 300 people from 4 to 5 different powers. Among them, there were more than 10 powerful leaders. The difference in power was too great. It seemed that the Wanyan family was about to lose. You dare to attack our Wanyan family? When my aunt comes back, she won't let you go. A 15-year-old boy shouted angrily. Seeing that his father was still fighting despite being injured, he rushed forward to help. Who knew that when he rushed forward, he would be stopped by a man in his 30s? Ha 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 ha. Is that so? Then I'll take your life first. Let's see who can save you. A cold light flashed in front of his eyes and a sharp sword moved towards his neck. The Wanyan family members cried out, "Feng Er." The youth only felt a bloodthirsty killing intent coming towards his neck. That killing intent was even colder than his yin qi. Even though the sword qi on the sharp sword had yet to cut his neck, he was so shocked that he couldn't move. He was completely shocked by the other party's strength. It was also at that moment that everyone's hearts tightened as if they were being tightly grasped by a large hand. Then, they saw a red figure sweep past like a ghost. The young man only felt that he was being pulled away by someone. His nose caught a whiff of an extremely pleasant and slightly familiar scent. He raised his head in that person's embrace and was stunned by what he saw. Wanyan Qianhua pulled the man away. With a flick of his sleeve, a wave of spiritual power came out and sucked the long sword in the man's hand. The long sword turned around and the sharp tip of the sword was aimed at the man's heart. Xiao! Hiss! The sharp sword qi carried a terrifying aura as it shot out with a swish. It pierced through that person's heart with the speed of a meteor, directly piercing through his chest. That person screamed as his body was pushed several meters away by the force. He staggered and fell to the ground. His eyes stared straight ahead as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. One of his hands was still tightly clutching his chest where the sword had pierced through. He seemed to want to say something, but when he opened his mouth, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. In the end, his body twitched a few times before he breathed his last. How dare you injure a member of my Wanyan family? All of you must die. Wanyan Qianhua's cold and emotionless voice rang out from his mouth. His voice contained a powerful pressure and force that entered the ears of everyone present, causing their hearts to suddenly tremble. A chill ran up from the soles of their feet as they felt fear from the bottom of their hearts. Because of this sudden scene, everyone stopped what they were doing and looked in shock at the woman in red who had suddenly appeared. Their eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. Aunt. Chapter 34:15. Hearing him call her aunt, Wanyan Qianhua revealed a smile. She reached out and touched the youth's head, saying, "I haven't seen you for a few years. Feng has grown up." Aunt thought the youth couldn't stop crying. He hugged her with both hands and cried very sadly, "Aunt, they killed a lot of our clansmen." Qianhua. Eldest miss. Sister. A series of surprised calls came from the surroundings. Everyone called out and quickly came to her side. Wanyan Qianhua listened to the crowd's shouts and swept her gaze across the ground. Only then did she raise her head to look at her clansmen and say, "I came back late. She should have come back earlier." If she had come back earlier, her clansmen would not have suffered so many casualties. She took a deep breath and patted the youth's head. Go to the back. Aunt will deal with these people." The youth retreated and returned to the back. His eyes were still looking at his aunt. "Grandfather, father, let the clansmen retreat." As Wanyan Qianhua spoke, his eyes fell on the people in front of him. Slowly, a bloodthirsty smile appeared in his eyes. "Today, all of you will die here. Ha ha ha." With just you? The 7 or 8 leaders raised their heads and laughed. They stared at Wanyan Qianhua contemptuously, as if they had ignored the cultivator who had died earlier. Wanyan Qianhua sneered and said coldly, 13th uncle, watch carefully. Don't let any of them escape. As soon as her voice fell, her ghost-like figure had already swept out. She didn't use the 10,000 ghost banner. Instead, she held a long sword in her hand and killed them one by one. The red figure shuttled through the crowd. The extreme speed and the sharp sword that could not be seen clearly shocked everyone, especially those who wanted to fight back. At that moment, they only felt a strong pressure enveloping them, shocking them and making them unable to move. They were at the mercy of the slaughter. Wherever the red figure passed, corpses would fall to the ground with their eyes wide open. Some of them died before they could even take a breath, and some of them died before they could even let out a cry of surprise. In this vast area, the remaining 200 or so people had no power to resist and were slaughtered. The thick smell of blood permeated the surroundings, causing some people to be extremely frightened. They used all their strength to break free from the shock of the pressure and wanted to escape. However, several figures were just about to escape when their necks were twisted and thrown to the ground. Wanyan Shirsan clapped his hands and snorted, "Didn't you hear my little niece say that none of you can leave? Are you trying to test my skills?" He looked around and saw that in less than half an incense stick's time, more than 200 people had all died at the hands of Wanyan Qianhua. Not a single one was left. TSK, no wonder you're more famous than me after cultivating for a few years. It does make sense. Wanyan Shirsan said, his eyes shining as he looked at Wanyan Qianhua who had finally stopped. With her strength, these 200 or so people were indeed not enough. These people were truly courting death. So many people actually besieged the Wanyan clan. Moreover, they happened to come back. However, it was fortunate that they came back. If they came any later, the Wanyan clan would have been massacred. Chapter 34:16. Qianhua greets grandfather and father. She bowed to the two of them and greeted them. The two of them held her hand and nodded proudly. "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." The two of them couldn't hide their excitement as they looked at her. When they saw the man in black coming from behind, the Wanyan ancestor asked, "Qianhua, who is this?" "He's a direct descendant of the main family in the upper world, Wanyan Shirsan. I call him 13th uncle." Wanyan Qianhua said and glanced at Wanyan Shirsan behind him. It was reasonable to say that in the Wanyan clan of the lower world, even if it was the clan head and ancestor of the clan, the status of the Wanyan clan in the upper world was higher than theirs, not to mention the clan head and ancestor. However, because of Wanyan Qianhua, Wanyan Shirsan still stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. "7th uncle, just call me 13th uncle." Wanyan Shirsan walked forward with a smile and said to the old man. Because the old man in the lower world's Wanyan clan was a branch descendant, he only had a little relationship with the Wanyan clan in the upper world. He called him 7th uncle because he was ranked 7th back then. Hearing Wanyan Qianhua say that he was from the main family in the upper world, the old man didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly said, "So you're from the main family. Please come in, please come in." The group of people walked inside, leaving only a few people to clean up the corpses outside. Wanyan Shirsan was the most talented person in the clan. After leaving for several years, he came back and saved everyone in the clan. At this moment, the entire Wanyan clan was happy and excited. The people in the clan wanted to surround him and say a few words. They wanted to squeeze in and take a look, but they were all stopped and sorted out the affairs in the residence. In the main hall, the old man wanted to invite Wanyan Shirsan to sit in the main seat. However, Wanyan Shirsan, who didn't care about this, waved his hand and sat down casually next to Wanyan Qianhua. He said, "I don't care much about the rules. You can do whatever you want. This time, I came back with Qianhua. You can treat me as invisible. Don't worry about me too much. Hearing this, everyone in the hall couldn't help but be stunned. Some of them looked at each other. Wanyan Qianhua saw that they were injured and hadn't been treated, so he said, "Grandfather, father, I see that all the uncles are injured. Your wounds haven't been bandaged, it's better to treat your wounds first." Ahem. Wanyan Shirsan coughed softly. He clenched one hand into a fist and pressed it against his lips. He felt a trace of blood spread in his throat. The hand that was pressed against the corner of his lips was stained with blood because of this. He was thinking of wiping the blood off his hand when no one noticed. Unexpectedly, Wanyan Qianhua's voice sounded at this time. "Grandfather, are you seriously injured?" Wanyan Qianhua frowned slightly. While speaking, she had already stood up and walked forward. She came to his front and reached out to take his pulse. She didn't know how to be an expert in medicine, but every cultivator knew how to make a simple diagnosis. Chapter 34:17. It doesn't matter. I'll just eat an inner core. Old man Wanyan said. Seeing that she found out, he smiled and wiped the blood off his hand. He then took out a medicine bottle from his space. "Grandfather, eat this." Wanyan Qianhua took out an inner core. It was the medicinal pill given to her by Fengjiu. The effect was even more remarkable. When the old man saw the medicinal pill in her palm, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. This is a 7th rank inner core. This was a heaven-defying medicinal pill. It was impossible to find it in this lower realm. As soon as the old man's words came out, everyone in the hall instinctively looked forward and were shocked. 7th rank inner core. Eldest Miss actually had a 7th rank inner core. That was really a good thing. Wanyan Qianhua smiled slightly. This was given to me by my sworn sister, Fengjiu. Grandfather, eat this. The effect is better. The old man looked at his granddaughter in front of him and suppressed the shock in his heart. He sighed, "Grandfather is also thanks to you. After living for so long, this is the first time I've seen a 7th rank inner core." Haha, what's the big deal? Although a 7th rank inner core is difficult to find, and, even in the master's family, it's rare. However, who asked Qianhua's sworn sister to be a crazy alchemist? What kind of medicinal pill can't she want? Wanyan Shirsan laughed loudly. When he thought of that little girl, Fengjiu, his eyes were full of smiles. I've heard of that person. Although I've never seen her, her name is like thunder in my ears. The old man said and took the medicinal pill. At the same time, he picked up the tea on the table and took a sip. If there's a chance in the future, I'll invite her to our house. Wanyan Qianhua said. After seeing him take the medicinal pill, she stepped forward to help bandage the wound on his arm. Then she helped her father bandage the wound and returned to her seat. The doctors in the hall helped everyone treat the wounds. Wanyan Shirsan was drinking tea. Wanyan Qianhua looked at the two people on the main seat and asked, "Grandfather, father, who are those people? Why did you attack our clan?" Their Wanyan clan was a hidden clan and had never interfered with the matters of the outside world. They also had few enemies, so why would those people act against their clan? The location of our clan was originally unknown to the world. However, ever since a few months ago, when someone came to the Forest of Ghosts to train, they accidentally trespassed into our territory and attracted the attention of our clansmen. After we sent them out, who knew that it would lead to disaster? The Wanyan clan master sighed, "We don't know which sect they are from, but they came here for our 3 treasures." Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua's face turned cold. She naturally knew what the Wanyan family's 3 treasures were. They were a family of ghost tamers, so they naturally had to have some suppressive items in their family. Otherwise, their bodies wouldn't be able to handle dealing with things with heavy yin energy all year round. The Wanyan family's 3 treasures were the 1000-year god soul wood, the soul-suppressing orb, and the ghost tamer scripture. These 3 items were their family's inheritance, passed down from generation to generation. As a member of the Wanyan family, they had to protect these 3 treasures. Now that she heard that those people had designs on their 3 treasures, her heart was filled with killing intent just thinking about it. Chapter 34:18. In a family, even if there was only one powerful expert, no one would dare to provoke them. Moreover, after this incident, even if there were still people who wanted to attack their Wanyan family, they would definitely not dare to act rashly. When Wanyan Qianhua heard this, she looked at her father and nodded, "You are all injured. Go back and rest today. 13th uncle and I will take care of the matters in the family. Don't worry. Well, your courtyard has always been cleaned. You can live in it when you go back. As for 13th uncle, I will ask someone to prepare a courtyard for him. Qianlong will send you there. When the matters in the house are sorted out, we will hold a welcoming party for you." The head of the Wanyan family said and looked at his son. "Grandfather, father, don't worry. I will take 13th uncle and sister there." The man who was waiting at the side said and looked at Qianhua with a smile. Wanyan Qianhua looked at him and smiled. She stood up and said to everyone in the hall, "Uncles, please recuperate first. Qianhua will invite you to drink in 2 days." As she spoke, she flicked her sleeves and more than a dozen bottles flew out from her sleeves and landed in their hands. "These medicines can speed up the recovery of your wounds. Qianhua will go back first." As she spoke, she glanced at Wanyan Shirsan and her brother. 13th uncle, sister, let's go. Wanyan Qianlong said and led them out. In the hall, the people who were holding the medicine bottles were also surprised. They didn't expect that she would give each of them a bottle of medicine. Especially when they saw the medicine, they were even more surprised. This was a top-grade medicine. It was really worth tens of thousands of gold. Out of the hall, a group of children, big and small, who were waiting outside, gathered around and looked at Wanyan Qianhua curiously. "Aunt. Aunt. Aunt." Thought the words auntie came from the mouths of the children. Some of them were direct descendants, while others were collateral descendants. However, they all called her auntie. The 15-year-old boy looked at his aunt who came out with his father and couldn't help but run forward in surprise. "Aunt." Without waiting for Wanyan Qianhua to speak, Wanyan Qianlong, who was beside him, looked at the youth with a gloomy face. "You are the elder brother, how can you allow them to surround you here?" "Brother, it's okay. They're just kids." Wanyan Qianhua smiled and tugged at his sleeve. The young man blushed and lowered his head uneasily. "Because everyone wants to see auntie, so. Wanyan Qianhua smiled and said to everyone, "Now that you've seen it, you can all go back first. The mansion will be rather busy today, so don't run around." "Yes, aunt." All the children responded and looked at her with sparkling eyes. Finally, under Wanyan Qianlong's signal, everyone dispersed. The young man stood beside his father and looked at Wanyan Qianhua. "Auntie, you've been gone for so many years. Why haven't you changed?" "I've grown a lot taller." Seeing a relative he hadn't seen in a long time, the young man forgot even the simplest thing. He forgot that for cultivators, the stronger they were, the more their appearance wouldn't change. Moreover, Wanyan Qianhua had taken the medicine given by Fengjiu back then. Her appearance would forever remain at its peak and wouldn't age. Chapter 34:19. Wanyan Qianhua glanced at him, then smiled and said to the youth, "Feng, no matter how many years have passed, aunt will still be like this. But you, after not seeing you for a few years, you are almost taller than aunt." Hearing this, the youth smiled embarrassedly. He was only up to aunt's chin now. It was not very tall. "Feng, call him 13th uncle." Wanyan Qianlong motioned his son to call him 13th uncle. "Feng, greets 13th uncle." The youth stopped and bowed respectfully to Wanyan Shirsan. When he heard the word uncle, Wanyan Shirsan had a strange expression on his face. Uncle? It sounds so old. Although she said that, she still moved her hand and took out something from the space and handed it to him. You can't call me uncle for nothing. Take it. This is uncle's gift to you. The youth looked at his father. He wanted to take it, but he didn't dare. Why haven't you thanked your uncle? Wanyan Qianlan said with a smile on his face. Thank you, 13th uncle. The youth thanked him happily and took the thing. He looked left and right and saw that it was a defensive treasure. He was even happier. Wanyan Shirsan glanced at Wanyan Qianlan and said, You are called Qianlan. You look much older than Qianhua. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianlan's mouth twitched. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Why did he get the feeling that he had asked his son to call him granduncle, and that was why he had said that? Wanyan Qianhua chuckled when he heard this. 13th uncle, are you bullying my brother? It's not like you don't know that I am my father's daughter. Wanyan Shirsan sneered and didn't say anything more. As they walked, they came to Wanyan Qianhua's courtyard. When he heard that Wanyan Qianlan was going to prepare a courtyard for him, he waved his hand and said, There is no need to prepare a courtyard for me. Qianhua's courtyard is quite big and there are so many rooms. I will just choose one to stay in. He thought that he wouldn't stay for too long anyway. Moreover, he was familiar with Qianhua in this residence. If he lived too far away, he wouldn't know who to talk to. As for things like men and women, he wouldn't think about it. What's more, he was Qianhua's uncle, so there was nothing wrong with staying in the same courtyard. That's not very good, right? Wanyan Qianlan was a bit stunned. He felt that 13th uncle didn't act according to common sense. How could an uncle stay in his niece's courtyard? This didn't conform to the rules. Wanyan Qianhua chuckled. Brother, it's fine. Just let 13th uncle stay in my courtyard. Anyway, there are plenty of rooms. Seeing that both of them said so, he didn't say anything more. He just said, Well, you must be tired after a long journey. Take a rest first. I'll ask the kitchen to prepare some food for you. With that, he left with his son. After the two of them left, Wanyan Shirsan looked at Wanyan Qianhua and asked, You're not planning to stay here for a long time, are you? Originally, he said that he would leave after coming back. Who knew that he would encounter this situation? Wanyan Qianhua sat at the table, holding his chin with one hand, and sighed softly, I won't stay for a long time, but I will definitely stay for a short time. You have seen the situation of the family. I haven't come back for so many years. Can I just stay for a few days and leave? All right. Then let's stay. Anyway, it's still a long time before that little girl Fengjiu gets married. He said indifferently. Chapter 34:20. She was just thinking that if she lived here for a few months, she was afraid that her belly would not be able to be hidden. For a moment, she felt a little embarrassed. However, although she was a little worried about how to tell her family about this matter, she still lived in the family. Until one day, she was lying lazily on the bed and did not even want to move. Wanyan Shirsan came in from outside and shouted, Qianhua, it's time to eat. Why are you lying on the bed again? Wanyan Shirsan entered the room and saw that she was on the bed in the inner room. He did not come closer, but looked at her through the bed curtain and asked. I don't want to eat. 13th uncle, you go. I won't go. Wanyan Qianhua said and did not get up. Seeing this, Wanyan Shirsan frowned, why do you look so weak when you speak? Could it be that he's sick? No, I'm just a little sleepy. Hearing her say this, Wanyan Shirsan nodded, all right. In that case, you sleep for a while. I'll bring you some food later. As he spoke, he walked outside. The maidservant sent Wanyan Shirsan out. When she returned to the room to serve, she heard Wanyan Qianhua's voice, "Go and bring me some sour plums." "Yes." The maidservant responded and walked out. The room was quiet. Wanyan Qianhua, who was on the bed, exhaled softly. She felt a little stuffy in her chest and a little nauseous. She forced herself not to vomit. Thinking of her physical condition during this period of time, she reached out to feel her pulse and revealed a smile that said, as expected. Fengjiu said that after eating that pill, she would definitely be pregnant after one night. Sure enough, she was really pregnant. Thinking of the child in her stomach, the smile on her face could not help but soften. This was her child. When Wanyan Shisan returned, he was holding a food box in his hand. When he entered the room, he saw Wanyan Qianhua sitting at the table eating sour plums. Those green sour plums, she actually took a whole bite. Seeing this, he could not help but feel his teeth ache. How is this delicious? It's so sour, and it's not filling. He walked forward and placed the food box on the table, saying, "I brought some food back for you. Today's fish is quite tender. Try it." However, when he approached her, he saw her expression suddenly change. She stood up, covered her mouth and ran to the washroom. Not long after, he heard the sound of vomiting. Seeing this, he asked the maidservant, "What's wrong with her?" Young miss is not feeling well." The maidservant said softly. "Why didn't you ask a doctor to come and see her? Why are you still here? Go ask a doctor to come and take a look at her." Wanyan Shisan ordered with a sullen expression. He frowned and looked displeased. Yes. The maidservant trembled slightly and was about to leave when she heard her young miss's voice. "There's no need to call a doctor. Take the food box on the table away and ask the kitchen to cook a bowl of bird's nest porridge for me." As Wanyan Qianhua spoke, she walked out with a pale face and sat down at the table. After gently exhaling, she hurriedly picked up a sour plum and ate it. The sour plum suppressed the nausea as soon as it entered her mouth, making her feel a little better. The maidservant repeatedly responded and left with the food box. Chapter 34-21. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua looked at him with a conflicted expression. She seemed to be thinking about how to tell him about this. Looking at her conflicted expression, Wanyan Shisan's mood couldn't help but become heavy. He asked carefully, "Qianhua, tell me honestly, do you have an incurable disease?" Wanyan Qianhua was stunned, and then she burst into laughter. "13th uncle, your imagination is too rich. I don't have an incurable disease." Seeing that she didn't seem to be lying, he asked, "Since you don't, why are you so pale? And you vomited? And you don't want a doctor to come and see you? What's going on?" At this time, she sat up straight, put away the smile on her face, and looked at him seriously. "13th uncle, I'll tell you the truth." "Well, tell me." Wanyan Shisan couldn't help but feel nervous because of her. He also sat up straight and looked at her seriously. He was already thinking in his heart that if she really had an incurable disease, he could go back and find Fengjiu to come and see her. "I'm pregnant." Wanyan Qianhua looked at him and said. Suddenly, she felt that as a niece, she was discussing her pregnancy with an uncle here. It was inexplicably funny. Wanyan Shisan, who was planning in his heart, heard her words and nodded. "Pregnant? So you're pregnant. This is a good thing." However, as soon as his voice fell, his whole body froze. He was so shocked that he stood up abruptly and knocked the chair to the ground. He exclaimed, "Pregnant? You said you're pregnant? Keep your voice down." Wanyan Qianhua quickly said and glared at him angrily. "I just didn't want my father and the others to know." The two of them were talking in the room, but they didn't know that the old man, the head of the Wanyan family, and Wanyan Qianlan, who were about to step in outside the courtyard, stopped in their tracks at the same time after hearing the exclamation. Their faces were filled with shock. Qianhua is pregnant. How could she be pregnant when she wasn't even married? Whose child was this? Why didn't she tell them that she was back? Could it be that he was bullied outside? For a moment, the three people's hearts were racing. They only felt a surge of anger in their hearts. They wanted to rush in and ask who the man who bullied her was. However, he was worried that she would be embarrassed, so he endured it. She hadn't told them about her return. She probably didn't want them to know or worry about her. But now that she was pregnant, it was only a matter of time before everyone in the clan found out. How would they look at her then? At the thought of this, they clenched their fists tightly. That heartless man had actually let her face such a thing alone. He really deserved to die. The three of them retracted their auras and didn't walk in. Instead, they looked at each other and left first. In the room, Wanyan Shisan stared at Wanyan Qianhua and asked, "Junju Shangs?" Wanyan Qianhua glanced at him and said, "Who else could it be if not him? You actually slept with him and are pregnant with his child?" He walked around the room uneasily and rubbed his hands. He returned to her and asked nervously, "Does he know?" Chapter 34-22. You're planning to give birth to this child? Wanyan Shisan looked at her. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in his head, as if he had thought of something. He widened his eyes in disbelief. Don't tell me you've been planning to steal his seed from the start. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua said unhappily, "What do you mean by stealing his seed? This is my child." Seeing her like this, Wanyan Shisan didn't know what to say. He asked, "Does Fengzhou know about this? Could it be that you're pregnant because of Fengzhou's help?" For cultivators like them, it was not so easy to conceive a child, especially the stronger the cultivator, the more difficult it was. However, they actually conceived a child after a one-night stand. It could be seen that she had a plan long ago. Wanyan Qianhua replied. Seeing this, Wanyan Shisan put down the chair that had fallen on the ground and sat back down. He sighed and said, "Then what are you going to do now? Are you not going to tell your father and the others? But if you continue to stay here, they'll know when your belly gets bigger. So I'm thinking, should we leave before my belly gets bigger?" She played with her hair and said, "The Peach Blossom Cove that Fengzhou mentioned is a good place to nurture the baby, and it's close to her house. If that's the case, then find a time to tell them and we'll leave." Wanyan Shisan said. In a few days. As she spoke, she heard footsteps outside. Not long after, a maidservant's voice came from outside. Young Mississippi, the maidservant came in with a bowl of bird's nest. She placed it on the table and said, "There's some stewed bird's nest in the kitchen." Coincidentally, the master went over. He knew that young Miss hadn't eaten yet, so he said to bring a bowl of bird's nest to fill your stomach first. When the bird's nest porridge is ready, he'll have someone send it over. Wanyan Qianhua waved his hand, indicating for her to leave. He opened the lid and picked up the spoon to eat while saying, 13th uncle, I've just started to show signs of pregnancy. It's not suitable for me to run around outside during this period of time. If I want to leave, I'll have to wait for the first 3 months. For the time being, I'll stay here and take care of the baby. I don't know anything about this. We'll do whatever you say. But I think it's better to find an experienced person to stay by your side and take care of you. Wanyan Shisan said with a frown. On the other side, in the upper world sect, Xianyuan Mose and Fengzhou arrived at the place where the Immortal Ascension Stairs was located. They informed the sect leader of their purpose for coming, and naturally, there was no objection. In a world where strength was everything, as long as they were powerful enough, no one would stop them from doing whatever they wanted. Even if they wanted to break the rules of heaven and earth between the upper and lower worlds and open up the immortal path that connected the two worlds, no one would say anything. The people from other places didn't know of their plans, but the people in the sect did. On this day, they saw the two of them fly up into the sky and discuss in low voices. Guan Shilin, who was watching from the side, asked Mo Chen worriedly, with their strength, can they really break the rules of heaven and earth? Can they really open up the immortal path that connects the two worlds? Will it consume too much spiritual energy? Chapter 34-23. The path of immortality on the ladder of immortality would not normally be opened. Even if it was, it would usually be opened from the lower realm. Now, when the spiritual aura of the two figures in mid-air surged, and a powerful airflow condensed into a divine thought to forcefully open the path of immortality, dark clouds rolled in the sky, and a fierce wind suddenly rose. Unlike the normal opening by the people of the sect, Xianyuan Mo's and Fengjiu used their own power to open the path of immortality. Because of this, once the path of immortality was opened, it came into contact with the laws of heaven and earth between the two realms. The clouds in the sky surged, and muffled thunder faintly sounded. Boom! Bang bang! Thunder suddenly sounded in the sky, striking towards Xianyuan Mo's and Fengjiu in the sky. However, in the next moment, a powerful pressure belonging to a godly king expert was released from their bodies and went upwards. The pressure of a godly king expert collided with the heavenly thunder. The heavenly thunder that struck down disappeared in mid-air, leaving only the muffled sound of thunder stirring in the clouds. The change in the weather above the sect shocked the cultivators in the surrounding towns and cities. They all stood on high ground and looked at the strange phenomenon in the sky from afar. In Four Corner City, the people from the various clans who were watching the scene in the sky from a close distance were even more shocked. Compared to the cultivators who were further away, they could clearly see the black and red figures in mid-air. They were Xianyuan Mo's and Fengjiu. Moreover, they could clearly see that when the heavenly thunder in the sky struck towards the two of them, it was blocked by the two of them and disappeared in mid-air. Even the heavenly thunder rolling in the clouds could no longer strike down. It only lingered in the sky for a long time, as if it was staring at Xianyuan Mo's and Fengjiu below. In the sect station, CK and Mu Xian, who were standing with Guan Shilin, Mo Chen, and the others, were also shocked speechless by the scene in front of them. When their master said that he was going to open the path of immortality that connected the two realms, they were also dumbfounded and felt that it was unbelievable. After all, that was something that could only be done by breaking the laws of heaven. But now, when they saw the scene in the sky and saw their powerful godly king aura and divine consciousness forcefully open the path of immortality, they did not know how to express the shock in their hearts. After so many years, it was the first time that they had seen with their own eyes someone who could break the laws of heaven and make the path of immortality. Furthermore, this person was their master. Their masters' names had already spread far and wide, but there were still many who didn't know that their masters were experts that stood shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Sovereign Lord Tong Tian and Sovereign Lord Black Tortoise. However, after today's news spread, no matter where they were, everyone would know that there were two more powerful sovereign lords in this world. No. They were different from ordinary monarchs. They were monarchs and phoenix masters. They were destined by the heavens. While carrying the excitement and shock in their hearts, they looked at the two figures in midair with adoration, and they couldn't help but feel honored when they heard the exclamations and discussions of the surrounding people. After all, that was their master. Chapter 34-24. In that instant, everyone's gaze fell on the sky above the sect. A seven-colored rainbow streaked across the sky. Half of it was in the sky above the upper realm, while the other half was in the sky below. They connected the sky like an arch bridge, forming a path of immortality. Look! They've really connected the two realms. Hiss! Unbelievable! They've really broken the rules of heaven and earth. They've opened the path of immortality with their powerful godly king divine consciousness. It's a brand new path of immortality. Exclamations of shock and disbelief spread all around. Looking at the scene in the sky, the sect master and the people in the sect could not help but sigh softly. Godly kings are really powerful. CK and Mu Xin, who were standing with Guan Shilin, Mo Chen, and the others, also looked up. As time passed, their master's voice came from above. CK, Mu Xin, come up. The two of them looked at each other, then immediately gathered their qi and flew up. When they arrived in front of the two of them, they bowed respectfully. Master. Fengjiu looked at them and said, from today onwards, the path of immortality will be guarded by the two of you. Come up. Fengjiu said and gestured for the two of them to come forward. Seeing this, the two of them walked up and stopped a step away from him. At that moment, they looked at the seven-colored path of immortality beneath their feet, and their eyes flashed. This was the void, but when they stepped on it, they felt as if they were stepping on flat ground. It was very different. The seven-colored rainbow will gradually disperse, but the path of immortality will still exist. I'll cut open the void and merge your divine consciousness with the path of immortality. In the future, you will cultivate and guard the path of immortality here. As he spoke, Fengjiu stretched out his hand and formed a complicated seal. He extracted a strand of their divine consciousness and merged it with the path of immortality. In the next moment, a flame mark appeared between their eyebrows. Feeling the burning sensation between their eyebrows and the addition of their master's divine sense in their divine sense, they couldn't help but be startled and look at their master. This path of immortality was opened by my divine sense. After you fuse, you will naturally become one with this path of immortality. Moreover, a strand of my divine sense will also guard this place with you. After I set up a barrier here, everyone who wants to pass through this path of immortality will need your permission. Fengjiu looked at the two and said. He turned around and set up a barrier on the path, then said, go in and take a look. You can cultivate in there in the future. Yes. The two of them couldn't hide the excitement in their hearts. After exchanging a glance, they walked towards the path of immortality. The crowd below could not hear what they were saying. They only knew that after CK and Mu Xian entered the path of immortality, their figures gradually disappeared into the white clouds without a trace. CK and Mu Xian walked on the path of immortality. They felt their divine senses move, and the entire path of immortality was stored in their minds. Every corner of the path of immortality was incomparably clear in their minds. Moreover, there were two spirit gathering arrays here, and the rich spiritual aura was not inferior to that of the immortals' cave in the sect. More importantly, this place was quiet, and the enchantments were condensed and moved according to their thoughts. Chapter 34-25. Xianyuan Mose glanced at them but didn't say anything. Fengjiu nodded. Okay, you two stay here and familiarize yourselves with this place. If you have any problems that you can't solve in the future, you can look for me. Yes. The two of them replied. After bowing, they retreated into the path of immortality and disappeared. Seeing this, the people below couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and discuss it. When Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu descended from the sky and headed towards the sect master, some people couldn't hold back their curiosity and stood up to see what the path of immortality was like. However, they realized that they couldn't enter it at all. Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu went to the sect master's place. The group of people sat down on the main peak and discussed in detail. Looking at the two people in front of him, the sect master asked, so CK and Mu Xian will be guarding there from now on? Yes, they can also cultivate there. Moreover, that path of immortality needs someone to guard it. I don't feel at ease leaving it to others. Fengjiu said. Now that the path of immortality is open, we have to leave for a period of time. I hope the sect master doesn't blame us for transferring the two of them from the sect to guard the path of immortality. The sect master looked at her and sighed. Phoenix Master, you're too serious. You've arranged everything very well. I have nothing to say. Moreover, guarding the path of immortality is much better than being a venerable in my sect. Moreover, that place is extremely beneficial for their cultivation. They chatted for a while on the main peak. Then, the group returned to their cave abodes to rest and prepare to leave tomorrow. When night fell, Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu once again headed towards the path of immortality. There was no night on the path of immortality, only day. The path of immortality was a vast expanse of white, as if there was no end to it. CK and Mu Xin sensed the two of them as soon as they entered the path of immortality. They hurriedly came before the two of them and bowed respectfully. Master. Yes. The two of them responded and walked from the path of immortality in the upper bound to the path of immortality in the lower bound. Xianyuan Mose glanced at Fengjiu and asked, "Do you want to rest before coming back? Or can you do it now?" Fengjiu smiled, "Although I used up a lot of spiritual energy today, I also rested for a while when I returned to the cave residence. Now that my spiritual energy has recovered, it won't be difficult for me to conquer the lower realm." As she spoke, she stood on the path of immortality that was as bright as day. She looked at the pitch-black sky of the lower realms, and her gaze moved slightly. Only one of the four guardians of the four celestial corners of the lower realm had ever appeared. Back then, even though she was arrogant and proud, she had no choice but to admit that she was insignificant back then. Now, a few years had passed. She had walked step by step from a small ninth-grade country until she became a divine king-level powerhouse in the upper realm. She had been through a lot along the way. But it was also because of this that she had grown so quickly. Now, she could look down on everything. Xianyuan Mose did not step forward. Instead, he stood not far behind Fengjiu and watched. CK and Mu Xin stood behind Xianyuan Mose and watched. They did not know what their master was going to do. But from the looks of it, it was not going to be a small matter. Chapter 34-26. A powerful divine sense was injected into the sky. Almost at that moment, the hearts of the four guardians of the celestial corners suddenly shook. They opened their sharp eyes in the palaces in the four corners and looked towards the path of immortality. In the next moment, four rays of light streaked across the sky like shooting stars and headed towards the same place. The people in the lower realm didn't react at all. Because of this, the people in the lower realm didn't know that the master of this world had changed overnight. In front of a cave residence in the sect, Mo Chen, dressed in white, stood with his hands behind his back. He raised his head and looked at the sky. His calm eyes were like the mysterious sea, deep and bottomless. No one knew what he was thinking. They only knew that he stood there quietly for the entire night and only returned to his cave residence to rest when the sun was about to rise. Jun Jueshang, who was also in the sect, also knew that Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu had opened the path of immortality. That night, even though he did not walk out of the courtyard, he knew that not only had the heavens and earth in the lower world changed owners, but even the upper world had been enveloped by a new divine sense. It covered every corner and quietly changed owners. Ordinary immortal cultivators did not notice it. However, Sovereign Tong Tian and the others, who were also divine kings, knew it immediately. The others were different. After all, they knew that Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu were both divine kings. However, they did not designate their territories as sovereigns. Now that they had taken over the upper world, it was within their expectations. However, when Sovereign Tong Tian heard the news, he was so angry that he smashed things in his palace. It was fine if it was the lower world, but he had already intended to take over the upper world. However, Xianyuan Mose had beaten him to it. Moreover, he was the sovereign of the upper world. It seemed that all the major sects and forces had tacitly agreed to it. No one stood out to stop him. This made him very angry. In particular, an expert who had just entered the divine king realm actually had the ability to change the heavens and earth in one night. Such means and boldness shocked him. The next morning, when the first rays of the morning sun shone on the earth, the chill in the air was dispelled. Before the people in the sect woke up, a white figure walked up the mountain path. Bai Qingqing, who had not shown her face for a long time, rushed over from the sect when she received the news from her master. Since her master was going back to get married, she naturally had to follow. Moreover, she had not seen her master and the rest for a long time and she missed them dearly. He knocked on the door of the sect and explained his intentions. Then, someone from the sect led him to the cave residence. Because she came early, when she arrived at Master's Immortal's cave, Master was still not awake. Instead, she bumped into Lang Hua and the others. Qingqing. When did you arrive? Lang Hua looked at her, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, and revealed a gentle smile. I just arrived, Bai Qingqing said. She looked at him and asked, are you all okay? We're all good, Lang Hua nodded and said, I'm about to go to the kitchen. Come with me. Therefore, Bai Qingqing responded and followed him to the kitchen. Along the way, the two of them chatted about what had happened in the past few years. Chapter 34-27. Master. When Bai Qingqing saw Fengjiu, she immediately stood up and bowed respectfully. You're here. Have a seat. Fengjiu smiled and gestured for her to sit down. He also sat down on the cloth spread out on the grass. He picked up a piece of cake and ate it while patting Hao-er's head. Mother, when are we going home? Hao-er looked up and asked. We'll go back in a while. Fengjiu smiled and looked at Bai Qingqing. He glanced at her and smiled, it seems that you've improved very quickly these few years. Bai Qingqing smiled, it's all thanks to Master's pills. Otherwise, Qingqing wouldn't have improved so quickly. Speaking of which, you haven't seen your brother for many years since you came here with me. We can have a good reunion when we go back. Fengjiu said. A gentle smile appeared on Bai Qingqing's face at the mention of her younger brother. A few years had passed and her brother should have grown up a lot. He should be able to take charge of things on his own now. Mose doesn't plan to go back. Mo Chen glanced at them and his gaze fell on Xianyuan Mose who was standing at the side with his hands behind his back. Xianyuan Mose looked at him, I have some matters to attend to. I'll go back later. It wasn't easy for him to get married. He wanted to give his beloved woman the best of everything. Therefore, he was going to prepare the betrothal gifts himself. We'll go back with Master after a while, but it shouldn't be too long. Hui Lang grinned and ate a piece of cake. Fengjiu looked at Mo Chen and smiled helplessly, he wants to prepare the betrothal gifts himself. I told him not to go through so much trouble, but he didn't listen. Guan Shilin laughed, Xiaojiu, you don't have to worry. With his current strength, who can hurt him easily? Getting married is a big thing. Let him prepare. We'll go back first to arrange things. There are many things to do before the wedding. We'll be busy when we go back. Don't worry, Master, we will be responsible for the preparations. Du Fan said with a smile, waving the fan in his hand. There are so many of us. Do you think we won't be able to handle the wedding? Besides, there are quite a lot of people back there. Speaking of which, we haven't seen them for a long time. Hearing Du Fan mention them, the others smiled. They knew that he was talking about the Feng Wei and the others over there. After leaving for so many years, they were finally going back. No matter who it was, they were all happy and looking forward to it. The group of people chatted and laughed for a while. After eating some food, they packed up and prepared. After bidding farewell to the sect leader and the others, they flew into the sky on their swords and arrived at the path of immortality. Xianyuan Mose, Hui Lang, and Ning Yi saw them off. The group of people followed Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu into the path of immortality. As soon as they entered the path of immortality, it was as if they were stepping on flat ground. They couldn't help but look down. CK and Mu Xian also came out to see them off. They sent them to the path of immortality in the mortal world. Fengjiu released the flying ship and let them board it first. Then, he looked back at Xianyuan Mo's. He walked forward and hugged him. "I'll wait for you at home. Don't make me wait too long." Chapter 34-28. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mo's lips curled up slightly. His deep black eyes were filled with gentleness. He held her waist with both hands and lowered his head to plant a kiss on her forehead. It won't be long." His big hand stroked her black hair. His deep voice was magnetic as he said, "Go." Fengjiu stepped back and looked at him deeply. Then, she turned around and walked forward. She took a deep breath and jumped onto the spaceship. She stood at the bow of the spaceship and looked at him. Until the spaceship slowly flew away and gradually disappeared from her sight, his figure was also covered by the white clouds. Only then did she retract her gaze and sat down among the crowd. "Mother, do you miss father? When will father come back?" Hao came to her side. His pair of small hands hugged one of her arms as he looked up and asked. "When he's done with his business, he naturally won't come back." "It won't be long," Fengjiu said with a smile. She reached out and rubbed his head. Mo Chen glanced at her. His gentle and calm eyes had a trace of undetectable gentleness. Just as he was about to look away, his eyes flashed slightly. He looked behind the spaceship and a faint smile appeared on his lips. "Someone's coming from behind." Hearing this, everyone turned around to look. They saw a white figure on a flying sword coming towards them. That elegant white robe fluttered in the wind. The elegant demeanor of an immortal was very pleasing to the eye. It's Jun Shang. Guan Shilin looked at the gradually approaching figure in surprise. Then, he smiled at Fengjiu and said, "It seems that he's coming for Qianhua." Fengjiu's gaze also fell on Jun Shang. Seeing that he had actually followed them, he couldn't help but feel moved. Could it be that he had guessed it? That's why he followed them. It seems that our journey will be quite lively. Fengjiu chuckled. Seeing that he was outside the spaceship, he waved his sleeves and opened the barrier around the spaceship to let him in. Jun Shang strode in and put away his flying sword into his sleeve. He looked at the people on the spaceship who were looking at him with interest. He calmly glanced at them and his gaze landed on Fengjiu, who was dressed in red. He walked towards her. "Why did you follow me? Aren't you going to look for my sister?" "My sister isn't on this ship," Fengjiu chuckled and gestured to Leng Hua. Leng Hua stood up and stepped back to make room for him. At the same time, he took a wine glass and placed it on the table. Then, he retreated to sit behind Fengjiu. Jun Shang walked forward and lifted his robe. He sat down beside Fengjiu and said, "If I follow you, she will appear." He had just heard the news that they were going back to get married. Since they were going to get married, Wanyan Qianhua and her were sworn sisters. It was impossible for her not to appear. Therefore, after knowing that they had left, he immediately rushed over. He knew that he didn't need to look for her. As long as he followed her, she would appear when the time was right. Hearing his words, Fengjiu smiled playfully. He took a sip of wine and asked, "Aren't you not interested in her? Why are you looking for her like this? When you really find her, how are you going to deal with your relationship with her?" Chapter 34-29. For a moment, he was at a loss. Even now, he still couldn't understand his own heart, let alone his feelings for her. Seeing him sitting there in a daze, as if he was lost in thought, Fengjiu's smile deepened. In love, many people are blinded by the situation. Even Jun Shang was the same. However, since this matter was related to her sister's happiness, she would naturally give them some pointers. At least, she could save them a lot of detours. The spaceship flew in the sky. Some of the people who had nothing to do were sitting cross-legged to cultivate, some were resting with their eyes closed, some were drinking wine, and some were chatting. In the evening, when the sky was about to turn dark, the spaceship suddenly made a loud bang. The entire spaceship shook violently, causing everyone in the spaceship to immediately stand up and look around. Bang! Another heavy blow hit the spaceship. The spaceship shook, and the people standing in the spaceship also shook. Feng Jiu frowned slightly. She looked at the huge ship that had come behind their spaceship at some point in time and was ramming into their spaceship. "Master, let's go out and take a look," Du Fan and the others said as they flew out. Seeing this, Guan Shilin snorted loudly, "Who dares to hit us with a ship? They're really bold." He was sleeping when he was suddenly woken up by someone. At this moment, he was in a bad mood. He immediately went out and was ready to teach those people a lesson. As they left the spaceship's boundary, Fengjiu's mind moved. The spaceship slowly descended and stopped in the forest below. Almost at the moment when their spaceship stopped, the surrounding cultivators on their swords surrounded them. Each of them stared at the magnificent spaceship with greed in their eyes. "Looks like this is a fat sheep. Such a magnificent spaceship, it's better than the ones we've seen before," a man said as he stared at the magnificent spaceship that stopped on the ground. "TSK TSK. The women on the spaceship are also very beautiful," another man said as he stared at the women on the spaceship with lustful eyes. Because they were so focused on profit, they carelessly ignored the handsome men and beautiful women on the boat. Moreover, each of them had an extraordinary bearing. At this moment, they only thought that their luck today was really extraordinarily good. Just by looking at them, they knew that they would make a lot of money today. They went forward to grab the people on the spaceship, but found that they couldn't enter the boundary. They tried to cut it with their swords, but they were also bounced away. Just as they were feeling depressed, they suddenly felt something dripping on their faces. They thought it was rain, but when the smell of blood entered their noses, they couldn't help but be shocked. Blood! It's blood! They looked up abruptly and saw broken limbs falling from above. Some fell on their bodies, while others fell around them. It was a shocking sight. Ah! The 20 or so cultivators below cried out in alarm and retreated a few steps. They looked up warily. Not long after, they saw a few figures coming over on a light breeze. The murderous aura that emerged from their bodies made them break out in cold sweat. It was only at this moment that they realized that these people were not ordinary people. Chapter 34:30. Who are you people? One of them asked in a trembling voice as he retreated, looking for an opportunity to escape. They had done so many things, but they had never encountered such terrifying prey. No. They must be blind to think that they were prey. These people were clearly malefactors. Guan Shilin's fierce gaze swept over them, then said to Du Fan, "Take care of them. It's getting late, so let's rest here tonight." "Okay." Du Fan responded, opening the folding fan in his hand with a whoosh. In the next moment, the fan in his hand flew out, followed by his figure. His extremely fast movement technique was accompanied by a flash of cold light. Only screams could be heard, and the thick smell of blood filled the air. Not long after, the 20 or so rogue cultivators all fell to the ground, dead. Fengjiu glanced outside and said, "Let's go somewhere else. We shouldn't be far from the town. Let's go to the city to rest." Hearing his words, everyone nodded. After Du Fan and the others boarded the flying ship, it flew forward again, finally arriving outside a city gate before the sky turned dark. After alighting from the flying ship, the group of people went into the city. Returning to this place after so many years, it had to be said that everything here was unfamiliar. However, they also had the power of the Phoenix Guards here. The group of people walked around the city, and after seeing the inn under their control, they went in. Mother, can we go to the night market in the city after dinner? Hao blinked his clear eyes and looked at her, his delicate little face filled with hope. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled slightly. Sure, after dinner, we'll go to the night market. That's great, thank you, Mother. The little guy jumped up and down excitedly with a smile, but he felt that this was not good, so he quickly stood properly. Because there were many of them, after checking into the inn, Leng Hua went to the shopkeeper and found out that the inn only had a few rooms and a few guests. Therefore, he told the shopkeeper not to accept any more guests. The group of people ate on the first floor of the inn, while Leng Hua, Du Fan and the others stayed behind to deal with some matters. After all, there were many things to do to contact the Phoenix Guards. As for Guan Shilin and the others, seeing that Fengjiu and the other women went to the night market, they did not follow them, but went back to their rooms to rest first. When the sky darkened, Fengjiu and the others entered the city and attracted the attention of all parties in the city. However, they had been away for many years, and in such a city, not everyone could recognize Fengjiu and the others. Therefore, although some people were curious, they did not know their identities. Until night time, when Fengjiu brought Leng Hua, by Qincheng, Qin Xian and Hao out to the night market, the four beautiful women walking together could almost cause a huge commotion. Moreover, no matter whether it was appearance or bearing, the four of them were incomparable to ordinary people. Even the daughters of the aristocratic families in the city became inconspicuous in front of them. Especially, among the four of them, Fengjiu, who was dressed in an extremely dazzling red robe, was even more outstanding when compared to the other three. Even if their appearances were superb, at a glance, the most outstanding and the most eye-catching one was Fengjiu, who had a lazy smile on his face. Chapter 34-31. The man in luxurious clothes revealed a smile that he thought was handsome and unrestrained. He looked expectantly at the beautiful women in front of him. His gaze swept across the four of them before finally landing on Fengjiu, who was dressed in red with a languid and wanton air. Compared to the other three, the woman in red had a wanton air about her. Her languid and casual movements inexplicably tugged at his heartstrings, causing him to be unable to tear his eyes away from her. Leng Shuang and the other two who were following behind Fengjiu saw the man staring straight at their master. A frosty expression appeared on their faces, but since their master did not speak and the other party did not make any other moves, it was not appropriate for them to make a move. Fengjiu looked at the man in luxurious clothes in front of her and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. Her indifferent voice carried a hint of laziness as she said, "No need, please make way." The world loved beauty, so the man's actions were normal. After all, she knew that they would not be calm once they came out. As long as the man's actions did not go overboard, she would not casually make a move. Hearing the woman's indifferent voice, the man's heart skipped a beat and he could not help but take a step forward. However, the moment he took a step forward, Leng Shuang, who was standing on Fengjiu's left, swept a cold glance and sent the man flying several meters away with a palm strike. She could tolerate the man staring at their master, but she could not allow him to take half a step closer to their master. Bang! Pfft! Young master! In an instant, the scene became chaotic. The man fell heavily to the ground. Due to the surge of his blood, a mouthful of blood surged from his chest and spat out from his mouth. The guards were so shocked that they rushed forward to check on him. Two of them even glared angrily and drew their swords from their waists to step forward. "Stop!" The man in luxurious clothes hurriedly shouted. He did not bother to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth and glared angrily at the two guards. "What are you doing? If you disturb the beauties, I will hold you responsible." When Fengjiu heard this, the corner of her mouth twitched. She was speechless. Even Leng Shuang and the other two glanced at the man strangely after hearing his words. Hao, who was holding Fengjiu's hand, quietly looked at the man and then at his mother. He couldn't help but think that his mother was so beautiful and his father wasn't by her side. It seemed that he had to protect his mother on behalf of his father and not let other men get close to her. Let's go. Fengjiu held Hao Er's hand and walked forward, passing by the man in luxurious clothes. Leng Shuang and the other two followed. However, they saw that the man was not afraid of death and went forward again. He jogged to 3 steps in front of their master and bowed in a strange manner. It's all my fault for being rude just now. Please don't take it to heart. Actually, I don't have any ill intentions. The man hurriedly said. Hearing this, Fengjiu stopped walking. She glared at him and said, if that's the case, then stop bothering us. Seeing this, the man hurriedly said, but miss, do you really not need someone to lead the way for you? I'm familiar with this city. I know where the night view is the best and where you can find the most popular rouge and face powder. We don't need it. Fengjiu glanced at him indifferently. There was already some impatience in her eyes. Goo. The man was about to say something when he saw a cold and delicate child suddenly walk in front of him. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Chapter 34-32. Hearing these soft and cold words, the man in luxurious clothes was startled and didn't react in time. Mother, mother. Hao Er's little face darkened. Are you stupid? This is my mother. Why are you calling her mother? When Fengjiu heard this, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. Her smile was as if spring had returned and all living things had come back to life. It was so beautiful that it was indescribable, causing the surrounding people to be stunned. When the surrounding gazes fell on her, Fengjiu frowned imperceptibly. She didn't say anything and just kept her smile. She held Hao Er's hand and walked forward. The 3 people behind her followed quietly. It was unknown if he was still in a daze, but the man in luxurious clothes stared blankly as Fengjiu and the others walked away. It wasn't until they were out of his sight that he muttered, her child is already so big. I really don't know what kind of man is worthy of such a peerless beauty. When the guard behind him heard his young master muttering, he couldn't help but shake his head secretly. That woman wasn't simple. No matter what kind of man he was, he couldn't be their young master. Fengjiu brought Hao Er and Leng Shuang to the night market. They didn't stay out for too long. After all, they still had to continue on the road tomorrow and had to go back to rest. What made her a little unhappy was that there were many people staring at them, both in the open and in the dark. Being stared at and sized up by so many pairs of eyes while shopping was really not a pleasant thing. Therefore, after returning to the inn, she also gave instructions that after waking up tomorrow, they would leave this place and first go to 100 River City's Heavenly Pill House to take a look. The next morning, Fengjiu ate breakfast downstairs. Leng Shuang brought Qin Xian to the market to buy some food to eat on the road. The others also woke up one after another. A few guests in the inn looked at the group of people eating breakfast downstairs with some surprise. No other guests had come in since yesterday. Obviously, this inn had been booked by them. This inn was considered one of the best in the city and the price was also expensive. Those who could stay here were not ordinary people. Now that they looked at the group of people downstairs, they were even more curious. Who were these people? Mo Chen, who was dressed in white, walked out of the room. She glanced at the people who were looking down from upstairs and then went downstairs. Not long after, Guan Shilin from another room also walked out. He yawned and stretched. Brother, are you all out to play with your family? A middle-aged man smiled and cupped his hands at Guan Shilin as he asked. Guan Shilin looked at him and said, yes, I guess so. I see that you all have an extraordinary bearing. I think you must be from a big family. My surname is Yang. How should I address you? The middle-aged man asked with a smile. He was curious about this group of people. After all, this group of people, regardless of whether they were men or women, were extremely outstanding. Moreover, it was obvious that the woman in red was the backbone of this group. Even so, the man in front of him, as well as the other two men in loose white robes who looked like immortals, had extremely extraordinary bearings. He couldn't help but be curious. Who exactly were these people? Why were they all so outstanding? Guan Shilin smiled and said loudly, "Me. My surname is Guan." With that, he walked downstairs. Chapter 34-33. Jun Ju Shang also walked out of the room at this time. He looked like an immortal who didn't eat the food of mortals. His indifferent and distant attitude made the people standing on the second floor want to go forward. However, they hesitated and didn't dare to disturb him. He walked past those people and went downstairs. He sat down at the table where Fengjiu, Mo Chen, and Guan Shilin were sitting. He casually and naturally picked up the porridge on the table and ate some snacks. After he finished eating, he wiped the corner of his mouth and looked at Fengjiu. "I remember that she seems to be from here." Hearing this, Fengjiu knew what he meant. She smiled and said, "Yes, but I have never been to my sister's family." Jun Jueshang looked at her and remained silent. He did not speak again. Mo Chen looked at Jun Jueshang and saw that his face no longer had the hesitation and confusion when he talked about Wanyan Qianhua. He knew that he had made up his mind and thought about his feelings clearly. Thus, a gentle smile appeared on his lips. "It seems that after drinking Audiobook and Mo Zhe's wedding wine, we will be able to drink your wedding wine soon." Jun Jueshang, who had just picked up his teacup and was about to take a sip, heard this. His hand froze for a moment. However, he thought of something and his expression slowly returned to normal. He did not speak too bluntly and only said, "There will be a chance." Hearing this, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and a smile appeared on her face. She held her chin with one hand and a teasing smile appeared in her eyes. "It's just that it will be a little difficult to get my sister to nod her head." Moreover, Jun Ju Shang couldn't help but ask, "Besides what?" Jun Ju Shang asked when he saw that she had stopped talking halfway and the smile on her face was somewhat baffling. I can't say it, I can't say it." Fengjiu shook her head calmly. She thought to herself, "If I say it, will there be a good show to watch?" She was now thinking, when Jun Jueshang saw her sister with a big belly, would he look like he had seen a ghost? Just thinking about that scene made her want to laugh. On the other side, Leng Shuang and Qin Xian were shopping outside. In addition to some dry food, pastries, and meat, they also bought some local fruits and some snacks. "Is there anything else you want to buy?" Leng Shuang looked at Qin Xian and asked. Qin shook her head, "We've bought almost all the food we need. We've also bought some snacks for the little master. There's nothing else we need to buy. And, then let's go back. Master and the others have to wait." Leng Shuang said. Just as they were about to walk back, they saw the pedestrians covering their noses and avoiding them, looking at the street behind them with disdain. Seeing this, the two of them stopped and looked back. They saw a group of 50 to 60 people, old and young, with tattered clothes and disheveled hair, being herded into the city. Those people's hands and feet were chained with black iron, and they staggered as they walked. Their bodies were covered with whip scars, and every one of them seemed to be severely dehydrated. Their lips were cracked, and blood seeped out. "What are you looking at? What's so good about a group of slaves? Get out of the way." The surrounding guards held whips in their hands and shouted at the onlookers. The whips in their hands fell to the ground, making a "pa" sound. Chapter 34-34. Phew! Seeing the whip, Qin Xian couldn't bear it. She moved her fingers and a breath hit the man's hand holding the whip. The man cried out in pain and the whip in his hand fell to the ground. "Who dares to attack me?" The guard cursed angrily. He looked at his red wrist and glanced around. Qin Xian looked away and explained to Ling Shuang next to her in a low voice, "It's just a 7 or 8-year-old child. I couldn't bear to hurt him." She was worried that Ling Shuang would blame her for causing trouble. After all, they came out with their master and couldn't cause unnecessary trouble here. "You didn't hit him too hard." As Ling Shuang spoke, she glanced at the guard who was scolding him. Just as she was about to retract her gaze, she suddenly trembled. She looked at the tall figure in astonishment, which was rare for her. Hearing her words, Qin Xian was relieved. However, she felt that something was wrong with her, so she asked, "What's wrong?" Following her line of sight, a tall man stepped forward to help the child up from the ground. At this moment, the guard had already picked up the whip on the ground and lashed out at the man and the child with the anger from before. Qin Xian was about to make a move. After all, with Ling Shuang's words just now, she was not so worried. However, she never expected that before she could make a move, Ling Shuang, who was next to her, had already shot out like a gust of wind and kicked the guard who was holding the whip out of the way. She was slightly stunned and a little surprised. Was it someone she knew? She immediately followed him. "Who is it?" When the surrounding guards saw the cold and elegant woman in tight black clothes kick their brother away, they immediately surrounded her and questioned her. Ling Shuang didn't look at the dozens of guards. He just stared at the tall man seriously. After seeing his surprised eyes, he asked, "Gu Xiangyi?" The tall man, Gu Xiangyi, quietly looked at the cold woman in tight black in front of him. There was surprise, astonishment, and surprise in his eyes. He opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. He just nodded. He recognized her. She was Ling Shuang, Fengjiu's confidant. If she was here, Fengjiu must be here too. Since they parted that year, he didn't expect that they would meet again in such a situation. It made him sigh and sigh with emotion. At this time, he felt more relieved. He had been worried all the way. Finally, at this moment, he saw a familiar person and felt relieved. If it was someone else, he wouldn't feel at ease. However, Fengjiu was someone he knew. Their journey of suffering was finally coming to an end. At this moment, he was incomparably glad that he was able to meet Ling Shuang here and that she had also recognized him. Ling Shuang looked at him and frowned, asking, "Can't you speak?" After seeing him nod his head again, he coldly glanced at the guards around him and ordered, "Unlock their locks." "Bitch, how dare you block our way? Brothers, let's go. Catch her." The leader of the guards immediately shouted and motioned for the others to rush forward. Ling Shuang didn't make a move because Qin Xin came to her side with a zither in her arms. She plucked the strings and the sound of the zither came out. It turned into streams of air and sent the guards who rushed forward flying, but didn't hurt the innocent people around them. Chapter 34-35. "It's Qin Xian's zither," said Leng Hua as he walked out of the inn and looked outside. Fengjiu stood up and said to Mo Chen and Zhen Zhishang, "You guys stay here and drink some tea. I'll go take a look." As he spoke, he had already walked out. Leng Hua and Du Fan followed him, while Guan Xilin stayed behind to accompany Mo Chen and Zhen Zhishang. Actually, even if something happened here, they didn't have to worry. No one in the upper realm dared to provoke her, let alone in the lower realm. Come, let's drink." Guan Xilin called out to the two of them and continued the previous topic, while Bai Qingqing sat with Hao on the side, waiting for them to return. On the other side, the guards were beaten to the ground one by one in a sorry state. Some of them couldn't take it and spat out blood, while others took advantage of the chaos and quickly blended into the crowd to escape. At this moment, the surrounding people were all staring at the beautiful woman holding the zither in her arms, dumbfounded. She had only lightly plucked the strings of the zither, but she had actually made the dozens of guards fall to the ground and spit out blood one by one. At this moment, the only thing that appeared in the minds of the people was, you really can't judge a book by its cover. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would believe that such a delicate woman could be so destructive? Do you know her? Qin Xian looked at Leng Hua with a gentle smile on her lips. Yes. Leng Hua responded. Qin Xian walked forward and walked among the guards. She took a bunch of keys from the waist of the leader and handed it to Leng Hua. Leng Hua took it and handed the keys to Gu Xiangyi. My master is right in front. I'll take you to see her. Hearing this, Gu Xiangyi used the keys to undo the chains on her hands and feet, then helped her father to undo the chains on his hands and feet. She then handed them to the people behind her and let them undo the black iron chains. It didn't take long for them to break free from the shackles. They supported each other as they walked towards Ling Shuang and Qin Qin. However, right at this moment, a stern shout that contained a powerful pressure resounded. At the same time, a wave of killing intent swept towards the members of the Gu clan. Want to leave? Leave your lives behind. The voice shouted, and the wind from a palm also attacked the people of the Gu family. It was as if they didn't care about human lives and wanted to take their lives with a wave of the hand. At this time, not only were the people of the Gu family unable to speak, but even their spiritual auras had disappeared without a trace. They were like ordinary people and couldn't avoid this fatal blow at all. Seeing this scene, Leng Hua, who was dressed in black, flew out. When her black figure swept out, she moved her hands and a strong pressure surged out. As she struck out with her hands, the strong airflow that contained a strong pressure knocked back the opponent's airflow. The two airflows collided, causing the middle-aged man to spit out a mouthful of blood. His body flew straight out and hit the wall of the city gate. Bang! Gotcha! His body slammed into the wall and then fell to the ground. Immediately after, the sound of the wall cracking could be heard. In the next moment, a loud rumble could be heard. After the wall cracked open, it suddenly rolled down and smashed towards the middle-aged man who had fallen to the ground. Ah! Chapter 34-36. Looking at this scene, the guard who ran to report was also dumbfounded as he stood there in a daze. The two middle-aged men and an old man who came from behind also saw this situation, and their complexions became dignified. Their gazes swept across the crowd and landed on the cold and elegant woman in tight clothes. Judging from her attire, she should be a guard or something like that. However, her aura was so powerful that even they couldn't help but feel apprehensive when they saw her. This is the report from the servant. He is one of the people who came in with the woman in red. One of the middle-aged men whispered to the two people, looking down at Leng Shuang with a dignified expression. The three people descended from the sky and landed at the collapsed city gate. One of them waved his hand and motioned for over 100 guards to move the stone away to see if the person could be saved. One of the middle-aged men in luxurious clothes looked at Leng Shuang and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you, Your Excellency? Why are you making such a big fuss in the city?" For them, Leng Shuang had always been a man of few words and only said 3 simple words, looking at the Gu family. Seeing this, the middle-aged man also looked at those people, frowned, and said in a deep voice, "These are a group of people who were escorted from other places to become slaves. Just for these people, you seriously injured my city guards, injured my subordinates, and destroyed my city gate?" Leng Shuang looked at the middle-aged man and listened to him, then said coldly, "These people, any one of them is more honorable than you. If you dare to touch them, only death awaits you." At this moment, her killing intent was released. It was bone-chilling and frightening. Hearing this, Qin Xian was slightly surprised and couldn't help but look at the man named Gu Xiangyi. The other party was dirty and messy, so she couldn't see his original appearance. However, it seemed that not only did they know Leng Shuang, but more importantly, they knew their master. "Little girl, you sure talk big." As a city lord, being shouted at by a little girl in such a manner, the middle-aged man only felt embarrassed and a murderous aura emanated from his body. With a raise of his hand, hundreds of guards quickly surrounded Leng Shuang and the others. Their long swords glinted with a cold light as they pointed at them. Once their master gave the order, they would kill them. At this moment, other than Gu Xiangyi and his father, the other members of the Gu family were confused. They didn't know the woman in black, so naturally, they didn't know who she was. Why did she recognize their young master and was willing to save them? When the Gu family saw the people unsheathing their swords and pointing at them with killing intent, they couldn't help but protect the women, children, and the elderly in the middle. However, at this moment of mutual hostility, when the surrounding people involuntarily retreated and swallowed their saliva as they watched this scene in horror, they heard a light voice that carried a bit of carelessness and laziness. "Since when can my little girl be scolded so casually?" Feng Jiu, dressed in red, leisurely walked over, followed by Leng Hua, Du Fan, and the others. Chapter 34-37. However, at this moment, no one associated the woman in red with the ghost Dr. Feng Jiu. After all, they knew that Feng Jiu had disappeared for several years. Some said that Feng Jiu had hidden herself from the world, while others said that Feng Jiu had gone to the upper realm. Some even said that Feng Jiu was dead. There were many different opinions, but no one knew which one was true. However, everyone knew that the ghost Dr. Feng Jiu had disappeared from all parts of the mainland. Naturally, no one would think that the person in front of them was her. Moreover, they had never seen Feng Jiu before. "Master." Leng Shuang and Qin Xian saw her and went forward to greet her. Qin Xian then retreated behind her, while Leng Shuang said to Feng Jiu, "It's Gu Xiangyi." Feng Jiu was a little surprised to hear this name. His gaze swept past the people in front of him with filthy hair and dirty faces. Finally, his gaze fell on the tall figure. "Gu Xiangyi." She looked at him in surprise, then glanced at the old and young people. She frowned and asked, "I haven't seen you for a few years. How did you end up in such a sorry state?" Gu Xiangyi cupped her hands and bowed to her. She smiled helplessly but did not speak. At this moment, Leng Shuang said, "Master, they can't speak. Are these your clansmen?" Feng Jiu looked at the 50 to 60 people and saw that even some children were covered in whip scars. His gaze immediately turned cold. Gu Xiangyi nodded. Seeing this, Feng Jiu said, "Go to the inn in front and rest for a while. Take your clansmen with you." As Feng Jiu spoke, he turned and walked back. He did not look at the middle-aged man, the old man, or the 100 or so guards behind him. He only turned to look at Du Fan, Yu, Wei Feng, and the others. "Stay here and deal with this." "Yes, master." Du Fan and the others replied. Gu Xiangyi gestured to her clansmen to follow her. Seeing a little girl fall to the ground, Leng Hua walked forward and picked her up, not caring that she had dirted his robes. The little girl saw that she had dirted Gu Xiangyi's moon-colored robe and couldn't help but shrink back in fear. She didn't know what to do and could only look in Gu Xiangyi's direction. "It's fine now." Leng Hua gently stroked the child's head. When he saw the child looking timidly at Gu Xiangyi, he smiled and said, "He's our friend." With that, he carried the child and walked towards the inn with the others. Seeing that those people didn't even look at them when they came out, and actually took those people away so openly, the city lord felt that his dignity was being challenged. He immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Capture them all." Feng Jiu, who had already left, did not stop when he heard the words behind him. He only left behind a sentence. "Cripple him." These 3 words floated out and Du Fan smiled as he opened the fan in his hand. The fan in his hand flew out with spirit force and attacked the city lord. A killing intent that covered the sky rushed over, causing the old man, the middle-aged man, and the city lord to be shocked. They quickly dodged, but they saw the sharp aura of the fan instantly cut through one of their arms. In an instant, blood gushed out and a muffled groan rang out. "Ah!" Chapter 34-38. They did not even need to make a move to deal with these people. They only needed to unleash their pressure to force them to kneel on the ground while screaming in agony. A powerful pressure filled the surroundings. The weaker people could not help but spit out blood. Some of them clutched their necks tightly, unable to breathe. The commoners who had retreated further away were dumbfounded when they saw this. They stared at the people in disbelief and were shocked. It could be said that all the clans in the city were alarmed at this moment. The patriarchs and ancestors of each clan hurried out to take a look. Against a city lord? What kind of person dared to be so arrogant? When the patriarchs and ancestors of the various clans came out to take a look, they could not help but gasp when they saw the city lord's guards kneeling on the ground under the powerful pressure. Disbelief filled their eyes. The powerful pressure spread out. Even though it did not affect the commoners in the surroundings, their hearts could not help but beat violently as they stood among the commoners. They were extremely shocked. Even the ancestors of their clans had to lower their heads in the face of such a powerful pressure. According to their people, the people who stayed behind were only the woman in red's guards. Then just how powerful was the woman in red? No. One of the old men's minds suddenly trembled. His body trembled as if he had thought of something. His eyes were filled with fear. Grandfather? Grandfather, why are you here as well? A man in luxurious clothes squeezed his way forward. It was the man who had been pestering Fungio the other day. He had seen the woman in red in the crowd earlier, but before he could speak, she had turned and left. The old man ignored him and looked at the middle-aged man beside him. Go and ask what the woman in red looks like. Also, what kind of people are with her? The middle-aged man saw the change in his expression and nodded gravely. Just as he was about to call someone over to ask, the man in luxurious clothes beside him hurriedly said, "Father, there's no need to ask." I know. It was not just the old man and the middle-aged man. Even the people from the clans nearby walked over when they heard this and surrounded them. Brother Chen, from your expression, could it be that you know who they are? An old man asked. He was also the ancestor of an aristocratic family. When he heard that something big had happened in the city, that a group of people had come out of nowhere and actually clashed with the city lord, he hurried over. No matter what, the city lord was the city lord of their city. If something really happened, they couldn't just stand by and watch. However, when they came here to take a look, they felt that these people weren't ordinary people at all, so they didn't dare to act rashly. You know. Tell me. As the old man spoke, he didn't even look at the others. He only let his grandson speak. Only he knew that his hands behind his back were already sweating due to nervousness. That woman in red is extremely beautiful and has an extraordinary bearing. Beside her are two girls in white and one in black. They are all very beautiful. I have been here for so long, but I have never seen girls as beautiful as them. Even so, the three of them are not even half as beautiful as that woman in red. Chapter 34-39. After being yelled at by his grandfather, the man in luxurious clothes didn't dare to say anything else. He only said, I was watching from here just now, so I heard one of the women call the woman in black Ling Xuan. Also, the woman in red seems to know those captured slaves. She said something about Gu Xiangyi. Moreover, I know that they're staying in the inn ahead, and they've even booked the inn. He paused for a moment, and then said, I went to take a look. Regardless of whether they're men or women, they're all extremely outstanding. They don't look like ordinary people. As he spoke, he added, they should be from aristocratic families. The old man was slightly shocked when he heard this. Right at this moment, a cry of surprise came from ahead. They looked over when they heard the sound, and they saw a man with a folding fan in his hand had actually crippled the city lord's cultivation so easily. On the ground, the middle-aged man and the old man coughed up blood as they fell to the ground. They looked at the smiling man with a folding fan in his hand with astonishment. Hiss. The city lord actually asked the city lords of the nearby cities for help just now. Look, the signal in the sky has been sent out. A member of an aristocratic family exclaimed in surprise. He felt that the situation was really troublesome. The city gates were destroyed, the city lord was crippled, and the guards in the city were lying on the ground half dead. Now that the signal for help had been sent out, if the city lords of the nearby cities rushed over, it would probably be a huge battle. At this moment, probably no one would have thought that if they really fought, they would only be annihilated. Of course, there was one exception, and that was the Qin family's ancestor. At this moment, his face was slightly pale, but he still didn't dare to be sure. Until he heard a voice from ahead. Who exactly are you to injure me to this extent? The old man on the ground wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth as he stared fixedly at the man holding a folding fan in front of him, who looked like an elegant young master. Du Fan fanned himself lightly and glanced at the people on the ground. He revealed a smile. Listen well, this young master is Du Fan. Du Fan. Du Fan. These two words were like a clap of thunder in the Qin clan's ancestors' ears, fiercely striking down from the sky and charring him black. As a result, his body trembled violently and he staggered back a few steps. Grandfather, grandfather, what's wrong? The man in luxurious clothes hurriedly supported him. Seeing this, the middle-aged man asked with a grave expression, Father, what's wrong? I don't think anyone from our Qin clan has done anything rude to them, right? The Qin clan's patriarch grabbed his son's wrist and asked anxiously. When the other family members saw this, they secretly waved their hands and signaled for those who were about to make a move to stop. They quietly watched the Qin family's old ancestor. They were certain that the Qin family's patriarch knew who those people were. When the middle-aged man saw this, he knew the seriousness of the matter. He thought for a moment and said, I don't think so. Our people didn't give the order, so no one got involved in this matter. Moreover, when they saw how easily those people shocked everyone, they naturally knew how powerful they were. Thus, they didn't dare to rashly make a move, lest they bring trouble to themselves. It's good that they didn't, it's good that they didn't. The old man nodded and clearly heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, one of the guards saw the seriousness of the matter and hesitated for a moment before saying, Old master, last night, the young master blocked the way and took liberties with that woman in red. Chapter 34-40. Since when did I flirt with her? I only wanted to show her the way and bring her around the city for sightseeing. Seeing this, the man in luxurious clothes hurriedly spoke, helping his grandfather calm down as he glared at the talkative guard. The guard lowered his head, not daring to speak. However, he knew that the young master's actions last night were seen as flirting with the lady in the eyes of others. Fortunately, they had pulled him back and stopped him, preventing the matter from escalating. After waiting for his father to catch his breath, family head Qin hesitated, then asked, Father, who are they? From the looks of it, they should have a rather powerful background. But, what kind of people were they? How could they frighten his father to this extent? The ghost doctor, it's the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. Old Master Chen's voice trembled as he said, There's been no news of her for many years. Now, she's finally appeared again. Hearing this, the people from the other families couldn't help but feel shocked. The ghost Dr. Fengjiu. At this moment, once this name was mentioned, all the information about the ghost Dr. Fengjiu flooded into their minds. In an instant, everyone knew that the lady in red was indeed Fengjiu. Aside from the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, who else could wear a red robe in such a carefree and unrestrained manner? Aside from the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, who else would have such powerful subordinates by his side? Aside from the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, who else would dare to act so arrogantly? While everyone was still in shock, on the other side, after crippling the mayor's cultivation and seriously injuring the two people beside him, Du Fan and the rest didn't even look at them as they strode towards the inn. With such a shocking scene, those who were tactful would know that it was best to end things here. However, thinking of the signal that the mayor had sent out, Du Fan smiled and opened the fan in his hand with a swish, gently fanning himself. If there was anyone who didn't know better and wanted to challenge them, they would gladly oblige. In front, Feng Jiu led Gu Xiangyi and the rest into the inn. The sudden arrival of so many people made Mo Chen and the rest on the first floor look at them in surprise. An old acquaintance. Feng Jiu said to them, then said to Gu Xiangyi, go take a bath and treat your wounds first. I'll get someone to prepare some food for you. Let's sit down and talk later. As he spoke, he instructed Leng Hua to take them down to make arrangements. Hearing this, Gu Xiangyi nodded and followed Leng Hua to the back. Leng Shuang, go buy some clothes for them and come back. Qin Xian, tell the shopkeeper to get more people to prepare some food for them. Also, invite some doctors to treat their wounds. Feng Jiu instructed them to get to work, then sat down at the table. Yes. The two of them responded, and then went their separate ways. He looks a little familiar, but I can't remember who he is. Guan Shilin said, looking thoughtfully at the tall man. It's Gu Xiangyi, the person who delivered the spiritual medicine to our heavenly pill house. I don't know how he ended up like this. His spiritual power has been sealed, and he can't speak. The old and the young are being escorted to be enslaved. Feng Jiu said, then paused. Fortunately, Leng Shuang met him and recognized him. If Leng Shuang hadn't met him and recognized him, he probably wouldn't have walked past them. They probably wouldn't know what happened to them in a short time. Chapter 34-41. As they chatted downstairs, Leng Shuang ordered the waiter to deliver the clothes to them after buying them. About half an hour later, Gu Xiangyi and her father walked out and stood in front of Feng Jiu and the others. Because it was just right for 4 people to sit at a table, Feng Jiu stood up and turned to sit at the table next to them. She gestured, sit. Looking at Gu Xiangyi and her father, who looked completely new, she felt that the Gu Xiangyi she knew in the past had returned. The two nodded and sat down at the table next to her. Give me your hands. She gestured for them to reach out. Hearing this, the two of them stretched out their hands and placed them on the table. Feng Jiu stretched out her hand to take their pulse, and not long after, she withdrew her hand. Seeing this, the two of them looked at her. Did they drink the medicine that made them lose their voices? Is it the same for your people? Feng Jiu asked as she took out the silver needles from her space. Gu Xiangyi nodded and poured some tea on the table. Then, she dipped her finger in the tea and wrote on the table. She asked, can they recover? Seeing the words on the table, Feng Jiu smiled. A mere medicine for losing one's voice is not a problem for me. Don't worry. She opened the wrapped silver needles and said, I'll help you use the silver needles and spiritual power to force the medicine out of your body. As for your people, I'll write a prescription for them to decoct the medicine. After drinking it, they should be able to speak by tonight. Hearing this, Gu Xiangyi and her father looked at each other and secretly sighed in relief. Gu Xiangyi used the tea to write the words, thank you, on the table and sat upright, waiting for her to perform the acupuncture for them. Feng Jiu smiled. She swiped her finger across the bag of silver needles and took one out. She stood up and went to Gu Xiangyi's side. Don't move during the acupuncture process. Mo Chen, Jun Ju Shang, and Guan Shilin sat at a table nearby. They did not disturb Feng Jiu as he performed the acupuncture. The guests on the second floor stood there and watched. They were very curious about their identities. Feng Jiu applied the needles to both of them at the same time. After half an incense stick of time, he pulled out the silver needles and put them away. The spiritual power in his palm carried a trace of vitality and was injected into their bodies. When the medicine was forced out of their bodies, it also opened up the sealed spiritual power in their bodies. Pooh! Pooh! The Gu family's father and son both spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. After spitting out that mouthful of blood, the sound that had been stuck in their throats could finally be heard. Furthermore, the spiritual energy around their bodies began to surge. Cough cough. The Gu family's patriarch coughed twice. He wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth and took a deep breath. He felt his entire body recover. He immediately cupped his hands and said to Fengjiu, "Thank you, ghost doctor. If we didn't meet you this time, I'm afraid we wouldn't know what to do." Fengjiu smiled slightly. "No need to thank me. Sit down and rest for a while. I still want to hear from you too. How did you end up like this?" As she spoke, she looked towards the second floor. Seeing that they were all staring at them, she said to the Ling Shuang, who was waiting at the side, "Didn't the shopkeeper say that the guests would be checking out today?" Hearing this, the Ling Shuang glanced at the second floor and walked up. "Guests, please." Chapter 34-42. After those people left, the shopkeeper asked the waiter to clean up the blood on the ground and then retreated. After Gu Xiangyi calmed down for a while, he said, "Actually, this is our family's internal strife. The people of the second branch colluded with outsiders to attack us and seize the Gu family's sovereignty. They also chased out the people of the first branch and had people escort us here to become slaves. I didn't expect to meet you here and be saved by you." After listening to him briefly explain the matter in a few words, Fengjiu only smiled. "It seems that in the years we were not here, many people have become arrogant. They even dared to attack the people who worked with us. Because of the family's internal strife, our people did not have time to ask for help from the Heavenly Pill building. They took over the Gu family and did not stop doing business with you. However, at that time, some people in my family escaped. I also asked them to ask for help from the Heavenly Pill building. We also left some clues along the way, but we didn't expect to meet you before they arrived." Fengjiu listened to them talk while asking Ling Shuang to get a pen and paper from the shopkeeper to write down the prescription. He asked Ling Shuang to buy some medicinal herbs and have someone boil the medicine for the people of the Gu family to drink. It's easy to deal with the family's internal strife. Fengjiu smiled and said, "I came back this time to prepare to get married. I won't stay on this continent for long. I will go directly to the lower continent. How about this? I will send someone to accompany you back to deal with the matter and solve it." Hearing him say this, the father and son of the Gu family naturally had no objections. They immediately nodded and stood up to thank him. At the same time, at the city gate, a few figures on swords flew over from the sky. When they arrived at the city gate and saw the collapsed corner of the city wall, they were slightly surprised and looked at each other. "City lords, you're finally here. Our city lord." The old man saw them and couldn't help but cry out in a choked voice. When they came down and saw the dying city lord being supported by the old man, they couldn't help but turn pale with fright. What's going on? How did it become like this? What kind of person could actually cripple his cultivation? This was simply worse than killing someone with a single slash. The old man took a deep breath and endured the excruciating pain in his internal organs. He said, "A group of people came to the city. They released dozens of people who wanted to become slaves on the street and injured the guards. They also heavily injured us and crippled the city lord's cultivation base. Those people are too lawless. City lords, you must not let such a person do as he pleases. Who dares to be so arrogant? You don't even know where they came from?" One of the city lords asked with a frown. "I don't know who they are. I only know that the man who injured us is called Du Fan." Du Fan? They looked at each other. They had never heard of this name before. Among the crowd, the Chen family's patriarch, who had just reprimanded his grandson, walked forward after hearing their words. "City lords, you must not offend that person. Old Master Chen, what do you mean by that? When the heavily injured old man heard his words, he couldn't help but glare at him angrily. Those people had injured them to such an extent. Were they just going to let it go like this? Impossible. Chapter 34-43. The injured old man supported their city lord with a face full of grief. City lords, those people dared to hurt our city lord today, it's hard to guarantee that they won't do the same to all of you one day. Furthermore, our city lord has a special relationship with all of you. Now that his cultivation has been crippled, how can all of you stay out of this and allow those savage people to continue living in this world? Today, they've crippled our city lord's cultivation and destroyed our city's walls. At the same time, they're also slapping all of you city lords in the face. When the hesitant city lords heard this, a vicious aura rose in their hearts. That's right, those people dared to treat a city lord in this way. Weren't they looking down on them as well? Furthermore, today's matter had already turned out this way. If they didn't step in, how could they establish themselves in this world in the future? At that moment, one of them said in a low voice, "That's right. Those people are so savage. If we don't do anything about it, wouldn't we be letting them continue to wreak havoc everywhere? Where are they now? Have they escaped?" Another city lord asked, his face full of displeasure. Hearing this, the injured old man was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "No, these people are very savage. They haven't escaped. They're staying in an inn in the city. It's just up ahead. Let's bring you there." Thus, the old man ordered his men to send the city lords back first while he was supported by his guards towards the inn. With every step he took, the murderous intent in the old man's heart grew stronger. With the city lords working together, he didn't believe that they couldn't kill those people. When the Chen family's ancestor saw that they were escorting the city lords forward, he couldn't help but become anxious. "You can't. You really can't." However, no one listened to him. The guards also followed those people and left. The surrounding commoners also followed to watch the show. At this moment, when the family lords and ancestors saw this, they asked hesitantly, "Elder Chen, why don't you just tell them that it's the ghost Dr. Fengjiu? If that woman in red really is the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, even if they work together, I'm afraid that they'll lose miserably." When the old man heard this, he looked at them and sighed, "They won't listen. Besides, in this situation, do you think that they'll believe me even if I tell them? Even if you hear it, I'm afraid that you won't believe it, right? Not to mention you, even I don't dare to believe it. After all, there hasn't been any news of the ghost Dr. Fengjiu for many years." Hearing this, everyone fell silent. Indeed, they didn't really believe it in their hearts. However, they still somewhat believed it. After all, from the way those people acted, who else would do such a thing other than the ghost Dr. Fengjiu? However, there were people who said that the ghost Dr. Fengjiu had already died, and there were also people who said that she had provoked a strong enemy and was hiding. Now, there were people who said that she had suddenly appeared in this city. Whether it was true or false, it was hard to tell which was the truth. Which one is fake? Teat. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.